You are watching an MLGA Network live broadcast. Welcome to Make Liberty Great Again, the best damn Liberty podcast that you've never heard of. I'll be your guide as we peer into the ridiculous reality that is our society and our government. Let's get to it. Oh, well, welcome to Make Liberty Great Again. I'm your host, Cam Harless, and with me today I have, again, Miss Jessica Green, because, like I said, I've secretly made her my co-host.
I never agreed to this, but here I am.
It's what it is, and you're going to accept it, and you're going to like it. But right after we did our last episode, which the last episode of the year ended up being the one that was like a cluster bomb of like 9 people talking at the same time. And it was fun, but it was like when I cut that episode down so that it could be audio as well, I think we lost like half the episode because it was like so many. So I was like, you know what? Let's not do it with that many people again. And we ended 2020 with Miss Monica Perez. And because, you know, I like to start things the way I end them, I guess. She's back. First of the year. Welcome back, Monica.
Thank you. And yes, it will be a little easier to decipher than last time. I have to say, last time was self-indulgent because it's hilarious. And it's fun when you're in the moment and we can hear each other, but it's like my mother and her sisters getting together. You know, it's like everybody's talking at once and then everybody just stops and is like, yes. And then you're like, wait, did anyone hear any of that? So this will probably be a little more intelligible for people watching and listening, but there's no way it's going to be as hilarious.
I don't know. Jessica's still here, and she's the comedy powerhouse.
Oh, God, don't put that pressure on me. But I have been drinking since about an hour ago. So.
That should help. That's the mood. The mood of the day. I had to quit drinking for my diet. The COVID-19 is just got to go. The freshman 15, I got the COVID-19, and I just got to get rid of it. So alcohol was the first casualty.
Oh,
it does lower the immune system.
I feel like I've drank more, but it's not because of COVID. It's just because I found like this deep love for whiskey that I didn't know that I had previously. Mm-hmm. But what was funny about this, so that was a bit, but I have to finish filling out my magazine. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I can't just sit there and let there not be enough.
Like there's glare.
Up in.
As an Irish, I feel the beer will help me avoid the COVID.
Oh yeah, I realized gin and tonic with lime is like they might as well just call that penicillin right there. I mean, that's like tonic is quinine water, which is what is in hydroxychloroquine. It's like a hydroxychloroquine, and it's a malaria medicine. Oh, wow. And limes, of course, vitamin C. Mm-hmm. That could be why I'm so healthy.
Zinc, I've also heard.
Yes.
I've also heard that smoking cigarettes and ingesting nicotine, people who do that have a lesser chance of dying of coronavirus.
No, that's serious. Like they come up with this craziest shit. Fluoxetine, like Prozac is one of the things that's supposed to prevent it. Smoking does prevent Parkinson's. They won't tell you that, but it does. And then what was the other thing that was crazy? Oh, my husband said this. He had read that if you have the Neanderthal gene, you're less likely to get COVID. And I actually do have the Neanderthal gene.
Yeah, I do too.
Do you? Can you believe? I'm not really paranoid. I know. I love the Neanderthal gene. It cracks me up. But I actually did that 23andMe thing. I think I wasn't quite far down enough the rabbit hole. And I was like, oh, that'd be great to know. And it just told me nothing I didn't already know. I figured I was a little bit Neanderthal. Things get I'm a little thick sometimes. But I think they say in Asia, Asians have more Neanderthal and sub-Saharan Africans have none. So if they really want to prove that stat to me, I just think it's one of those things they just get it's like a Penn and Teller where they just, when they had people like use 15 recycling bins. And they actually, people just would keep separating their trash. It would take them like an hour a day, and they just wanted to see how far they could push it. And they just, I feel like that's what it is when they say stuff like this. The Neanderthal.
My mom actually got it done, and the piece of paper she got said that she was related to Cleopatra, and I was like, Mother, everyone who gets this piece of paper is related to Cleopatra. Like, you do understand that, right? And she's like, no, we're related to this king and that king. And
it would work that, they're like, we have very few ultimate ancestors, right? We have a mitochondrial Eve. We all have the same ultimate mother, which is kind of interesting. I don't know how to think about that. Are we getting into esoteric? Is that esoteric? I don't even know what esoteric means. That is how little I know about
well, that's kind of a great way to define esoteric if you don't know what it means. Like
that is. Okay. I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, no, it kind of means like things that other people don't know what they mean. So.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Well, that would definitely count for me. That's why I get people.
You would have used it correctly, is all. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, people think I know about all that stuff because they think of me like as just total conspiracy theory, but I really don't know the stuff that gets out of the 3-dimensional. I got nothing there. I think I am not a 2-dimensional thinker, but I'm not a 4-dimensional thinker. So I probably need to expand my horizon, because the only thing that like makes me happy is to listen to the higher side chats, which they are just talking about aliens and ghosts and spaceships, none of which I have like I'm not like, oh yeah, I'm sure that's true. I'm just like, I feel like I love it to death. I mean, I've had Greg Carlin on my show and I'm a paying customer, but for me, it gives me the same feeling as science fiction. It just makes me feel like nothing can hurt me in this place because it's not in my world.
I also really enjoy like UFOs and cryptids and things like that. And I have that same kind of feeling with it. Like I kind of on some level know that it's, a lot of it is hokey. Some stuff gives me pause. And it's that, 1% of things that gives me pause that kind of like makes it exciting. But the rest of it is like just, it's great. It's what's the point of life without a little wonder and a little awe? Like,
yes.
And everything.
The questions are for sure there. That's why, like, I think atheism, I understand agnosticism, but atheism, I don't really understand. I'm like, at least somebody has a possible explanation. Somebody's coming up with a theory. God is a theory. The atheist is like anything but God. That's like, well, that's not really a theory. And so like for me, I know there's a question and I don't really know the answer. But when it comes to stuff like that, grabbing onto it, I can't do it without something that makes sense, like chemtrails. It took me forever to understand what chemtrails were. I'm not going to explain it to people. Like, you just have to eventually be like, that pattern doesn't, their explanation doesn't fit that pattern. But it took me like a couple of years. But anyway, these people all want to hear about what's happening in DC. But but for me, like,
but no,
I think it was.
I'm interested in what you're saying.
You guys go first. I know that's so much more interesting to me, but because this stuff, we've gotten to where it's, as somebody, a friend of mine texted at me, it's like pure VR at this point. It's not even real.
Well, that's what I was saying to Cam, like almost just before you came on, was could you imagine trying to explain to yourself yesterday what you've seen today and that you wouldn't believe it? Like if you tried to tell yourself that these things that were about to happen, I would be like, no way.
I would say that's true for a year ago, but yesterday on my show with Binkley and Garland Favorito, who's the election guy, you probably have heard of him being that you're in Georgia and you've listened to my show. I've had him on a lot. We were talking about how they had geared us up for violence for so long that we wouldn't be surprised if today the Electoral College thing did turn violent. And when two things I'll say about it, they showed pictures of people not doing that. I saw no pictures of that. I only saw pictures of like fanny packs and American flag sweatshirts, just like when I was marching against Obamacare. Like everyone was stacking up their garbages were full and they would like stack them up till they were 5 feet tall. Like nobody would put anything not in the garbage. Like that's what it looked like to me. So there was that. But what I didn't expect was that it was such a simple reason they did it. At the end of the day, after everybody went home, because people who were there to have a legitimate protest saw what was happening and was just like, oh, okay, this is set up. I'm going home. I'm not going to feed this fire anymore. And then they all went back in and they're like, there will be no further objections, I'm sure. And it's like, oh, that was cheap. I thought it was going to be a little more rabbit hole than that.
Yeah.
That's my take on it.
What was
I sort of mean
though,
specifically I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say what's funny though is
we should raise hands.
You.
Sister.
Well, my point was short, sort of specifically the man with the fur horn helmet. If you had told me that Nancy Pelosi's chair would be occupied by a shirtless man in a furry horn Viking helmet, I would not have believed that.
Oh, so, I missed that. So I'm guessing that was one of the agents provocateur who was there to make people look stupid. I'm looking to see. I'm trying to look at it on my phone.
He is listed as having the career actor, and he has been seen at other protests wearing that gear. But at the same time, the image of him standing in the congressional, I guess that's a congressional desk. I don't know the official name for it. But sort of standing there with an American flag, shirtless in this like Viking gear. It was sort of the perfect imagery. I really enjoyed it. I'm like, that will be burned in my brain forever. And it's never going to feel as holy to them anymore. Like that's their sacred space. And it's going to be a little bit sullied for them now. And I enjoy that.
What I was going to say though, is I was going to have an episode that was going to talk in the realm of interdimensional beings, the clockwork elves, aliens, stuff like that, because I have a different viewpoint on that than a lot of other people. And it's one that I've held for a while, but it was one that was very cemented and questioned within this last year. And so me reading the different books I've read and the things that I've looked into, it was crazy to hear Michael Malice and Alex Jones start talking about clockwork elves and the dimensions and stuff. And I was like, we need to do that. And so
what's clockwork elves? Yeah, sorry.
I'm not familiar with that one either.
So
I'm not really familiar with that because that is something that was the first time I'd heard of clockwork elves before. But I'd set up a conversation about that for the 29th of December. And my wife goes, hey, it's the 28th of December. Do you know what I want to do today? Pop out a child. So it was... So
that can't have been too much of a surprise.
It wasn't, because the last time we had the conversation, which I set up this conversation with you like really shortly thereafter, because I was like, that was chaos. I just want you back on so that we can have a more thorough conversation. But yeah, she had the baby on the 28th. Little girl named Daisy Joy, and
I just love that
she's
name.
Beautiful,
so cute
and lovely. And I just thought it was really ironic because we talked about doing it either this week on Wednesday or next week, and I was like, let's just do the 6th. Let's do it. And then today, after I go to the store in my Gunners to Gitmo shirt to pick up a couple of new guns.
Did you really?
Oh yeah.
The store must have been crowded.
It was not, but I live in Florida and they have a stupid 3-day waiting period.
Which results in a lot of beaten women dying, but whatever.
Yeah, I don't know why.
That's an infringement. That's what I call infringement.
Yeah, because the women, when they feel really in danger, they're the ones who want the guns in a hurry. Like real regular criminals aren't like, oh, I'm a criminal, I need a gun right now. So yeah, whatever. Anyway, but they say it actually results in more homicide, like murder.
But I'm in the store and I start seeing they're storming the Capitol on Twitter. And Jessica was saying that she hadn't seen me comment on what was going on, and she was like, I hope he doesn't miss this. And then of course I see it, and I'm just like, my Twitter's just been like I'm gonna say as many things as possible, because this,
I've had the best day on Twitter. It has been so fun
good.
today.
I just find it overwhelming. I feel like this stuff is so. It's like
Well, that's what I
watching,
want to know.
a big
because
movie.
because you see things differently than everyone else does. For the most part.
That's probably true.
And so I had sent who I named Jar Jar Binkley the link to join us if he decides to.
Did he? He's not a.
He said he might.
Oh, he did. Okay, because he doesn't always communicate. he goes radio silent forever. So I just feel like he doesn't have enough phone chargers. But whatever. I should just every birthday and Christmas I should send him another phone charger. Anyway, so I didn't know if you even heard it, but yeah. So what were you gonna say though?
No, I was just gonna say it was just utterly ironic that on this day, because I thought something might happen today because of the certification of the Electoral College, but it's just ironic that they stormed the Capitol and I'm having Monica Perez on my show that night.
Hey, I tried to have a march on Washington July 4th and like nobody wanted to go. I had people like me and listeners and stuff who wanted to go, but I was like Glenn Beck and all these guys who did the Obamacare marches. I was like, we just need to end this lockdown. We can't have them running up $4 trillion deficits to bail out Democrat states that won't let their people go to work. This is crazy. And everyone's like, oh, what? I'm sorry, I gotta go. So now I don't know where these things come from. You know what I mean? So they bring these people up, and Binkley and I have been expecting this because, first of all, I absolutely think it's agents provocateur. I do not think this is Trump people. And then because they kept like gearing us up for violence on election day. And I was like, the only way they're going to get violence on election day is if Trump is the one who's called the winner, because the right is of a very different thing. That's why there's no talk radio from the left. Say it again.
I said they're pussies.
No, I don't think that's it. I think they until Trump came along, they were quite ordered thinkers. And I think that the liberal talk radio never caught on because it's not really a thinking sport. It's not like the rational stuff. And to get them to they want, and I heard some lawmakers say, but they are like more law and order. They want to restore the Constitution. They don't have it in their makeup to be like, oh, we're just going to burn the place down. I think that would be very hard to do. Certainly on November 3rd, but now maybe I looked at that and I thought, well, maybe they'll get them to do it. They'll do agents provocateur. They've been modeling the behavior with the BLM stuff and the zone and Portland. They've been doing all that. Binkley and I have been talking about for years now. When they came out on the left and said, I think it started with the Parkland thing where they told the young people, hey, even if you are not allowed to leave your classroom or whatever, you don't have a vote, you don't have a say, you should break the law. We're not telling you not to break the law. He played me a clip of Pod Saves America or something saying that to the young people. That's when it started. And just like it took a lot to bring identity politics to the right, and it took Trump to do that, it's taking a lot to make it even vaguely plausible that the Midwestern fanny pack crowd is going to do this stuff. And I knew people, my mom's friends went down to Washington for the last protest a few weeks ago, and I know what it was like. I used to march for life with them. And I mean, it's like a party. It's like, that's why I knew the MAGA hat kids were innocent. They get it and they're so happy and it's so positive. And they said that it was the greatest time ever. And then like these weirdos in black were totally random and inappropriate and coming up to us and just cursing and stuff. And I knew that this was like the Antifa provocateurs, a few weeks ago. And that's how come I kind of had a sense that, well, they might make something up. And Binkley saw the memo, the Capitol Police, which is a total deep state operation, or they've really facilitated false flags in the past, let's just say. Aaron Alexis, Miriam Carey, that wasn't a false flag, it was murder and cover-up. that they said just leave the doors open, shelter in place, but leave the doors open so that when people went in, and I also, this is the last thing I'll say, when I did march against Obamacare, they would not let you anywhere near the Capitol. You were so far away. There was no freaking chance. And if we started storming the Capitol that day, they would have come out with machine guns. It would have been Kent State. Like, there's no effing way. And they had congressional aides on the balconies taunting us. And I had an activist say to me, they do that. They're just trying to get you. I was really getting infuriated. He said, just don't worry about it. And so that stuff, it just doesn't, it looked like it was a setup. And then when I heard what they did, which was they stopped the objections, because I like an idiot, went back today and I researched Rutherford B. Hayes and the closest comparison you could have and what would be the right process. And I read the Constitution and I was all ready to talk about it. And I'm getting my phone's blowing up. Oh my God, can you believe what's happening? So I start my podcast where I was going to educate people and talk about the Constitution. I was like, oh, did you see what happened there? And that's what happened. And now we're not talking about that. And they're not even proceeding. It's insane. And so they're like, okay, you have to trust the process. This is mob rule. I'm like, okay, so you're letting the mob just stop the process. So now you're doing the exact opposite. You're letting the mob control the outcome by, again, not adhering to any kind of valid process. And I think they should have had they should not have certified they probably did it by now, but they should not have without further. Because the lawsuits are not all done. Like in Georgia, Garland's has a compelling lawsuit that will overturn the electoral votes in Georgia if it's allowed to proceed, and they keep blowing it up. Anyway, there you go. There's a little Monica Perez show for you. It's just fire hose.
So just to maybe not offer pushback, but just to maybe offer some insight. A relative of mine works as a poll worker here in Georgia, and she was there from dusk till dawn yesterday, basically. And she said you could very much tell who the Republicans were. And she said the energy coming off of them was palpable. And they were
in what way?
They were angry.
Right.
And a lot of them were just like at their breaking point and looked really stressed out. And she just really picked up on that from them. Was
this in one of the many places where the Dominion machines weren't working and they were collecting the ballots by hand?
Yeah. So it's the largest county is Gwinnett County. So I don't think it hurts to say that, they're in Gwinnett, and that is a hot zone for what's going on.
Right.
So
I know two people in Sandy Springs who could not vote on the machine. They had to give their ballots to a person and trust that they were going to feed them in later. And that's not the only place they were reporting that. So I can imagine people being angry by then, especially since the media was saying, I got a tweet suppressed for tweeting out an article that talked about that.
Yep.
And they're just... I'm not angry because my expectations were low, and I'm not a Republican. I didn't vote for Trump. I always vote for Ron Paul. I don't know if I will continue to vote for him after he dies, but I might. Anyway, people vote, tens of thousands of people vote for Mickey Mouse, like write in Mickey Mouse. So you can do it. Anyway. Oh, good. Look. Good.
Ron Paul would be a better politician dead than any of them are alive, frankly.
Yes. Maybe. Well, Rand Paul's the one who called it. Rand Paul today is the one who said there will be no more objections. I didn't hear him. I only heard them say that he said that. So I don't know if he was saying it ironically or exasperatedly or this is how it should be. But it completely backfired, right? So you're oh, Trump is so bad, but it completely bad. If he's so bad and so incredibly stupid that everything he tries to do turns wrong, except for maybe bankrupt the country. That seems to be succeeding.
So I also don't put it past the Capitol Police to allow the protesters in there in order to make the protesters look bad or, whatever it is. I don't put that past them at all. But even if that was their play, you have millions and millions of people that already don't care what the establishment thinks of them. They already don't care what the media thinks of them. They feel disenfranchised. They feel that this election was stolen from them. And they feel that I've heard the phrase Olympus has fallen millions of times today. But people have the sense that the country is over and they're ready to burn down the Capitol. So I don't think all of it is provocateur. They're seizing on something that is organic. And
but it's not it was maybe it is emerging organically now, but it was created by Trump in this movement. They took the momentum that Ron Paul got going and they redirected it into a guy, Trump, who had no principles, no record, no constitutional basis. All the people who love Trump are not the same people who want to restore the Constitution. They are not. They're not ideological. The emotions you're talking about is just emotion, and it isn't ideologically consistent with the group that's being painted as the ones who are there.
I'm not sure that I agree that a lot of the people who were part of the Ron Paul movement necessarily transferred over to the MAGA movement. Oh, okay. Sorry, I might have misunderstood you.
They took the energy. They took that energy, and they redirected it. I don't think it's the same people because
just like the populist energy.
Well, there was a problem with the Republican Party. People were pissed. Mitt Romney was the candidate. John McCain was the candidate before that. And that might even be a little more consistent with how the Republicans have moved since Irving Kristol decided to make it a neo-Trotskyist war party. That's another story. But they deliberately moved it to be this something else thing. And that did become real with the terrorism and everything. Then they really felt like it was like, I would talk to people and they would say, Ron Paul's foreign policy is dangerous. Like Ron Paul's foreign policy is dangerous is what people would say to me. Republicans. Right. So Trump then came in and fed that emotion and satisfied their need to correct what was wrong with the party. But he did it by being rude to Democrats. So maybe you have people who are triggered like that or are responding to the emotion, but I do not think that it's a group that they deal with anger by lashing out, like spoiled kids who never had any discipline, unless there is this subculture that kind of came from nowhere, which is possible.
So there is that sort of Trump culture of people that, there is the conservative movement and then there's the Trump people. And that's, I think, a different energy, too. You're talking about types of energy. Like,
yes.
All of, like, the conservatives that I knew growing up on the radio, for example, like 10 years ago, definitely don't fit into that category of, like, the way that, like, the Trump train and all of that.
So tell me, I want to make sure I understand what you're talking about.
So, for example, like, although I would say obviously Herman Cain is a Trump supporter.
Yeah, because some are Trump people and some are never Trumpers. Like Eric Erickson was saying, shoot them. Shoot them all.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I guess I don't pay too much attention to Eric these days.
Somebody told me I don't listen to him. But so, so I guess we're talking about a few different groups, really. We've got never Trumpers. We've got people who think that Trump is a Republican and like him because of that. And that's really who I'm talking about. Like those people are not rioting. And then there's people who, I guess the cult of personality thing, but I don't really see that. About. Yeah, I mean that's like maybe the Q continuum would kind of be. Well,
it's also not necessarily conservatives. Like these people are like it's a populist movement, so it's people who are disenfranchised by the state, not necessarily people who are even conservative or have Republican values. They're just kind of people who identified with what Trump was saying, which was screw the liberals. And
so that's the thing that is crazy to me, to be the opposite without being the opposite, to hate the other without being the other of the other.
It's ironic you sort of become the monster that you're trying to slay.
Or nothing. It's like weird. You are just total negativity. Cam, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, have either of you guys read The New Right by Michael Malice?
Not yet.
It goes through the kind of where we are today. Because The New Right really started with Buchanan and Rothbard. And then it came through Ron Paul. And then people saw in 2008, 2012, a man who was willing to stand up to the establishment and say it was illegitimate and certain aspects of it were illegitimate. And then, and you're right, in 2016, there were several people who tried to take on the Ron Paul mantle. Obviously, Rand Paul tried, but he sucked up to the establishment because he didn't think what his dad did worked.
Yeah, I think
And
that's where I lean.
That was a downfall of him. And that was kind of his downfall.
Well, no, he won. He's there.
Well, no, but I mean,
downfall for us, but maybe that was
right.
He compromised, and he's getting what he was after.
I'm glad he's there now because he's been the voice of reason on a lot of these things too.
Yeah, it was his downfall insofar as running for president, but he does have Donald Trump's ear, which is good. And then what was funny was in 2016. I don't know if you remember this. Ted Cruz got up and claimed the Ron Paul movement and said that he was the legacy of Dr. Paul. And I was like, his son is right there. What kind of crap is that?
Ted Cruz. The Tea Party they're such a sham. Such a sham.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. If you look at the kind of the progression over the years, you have people becoming less and less happy and willing to deal with the establishment. Because Ron Paul was a call on the establishment, but it was a principled call against the establishment. But then you have Donald Trump come in there and he's going to say, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to shit all over the establishment. And I do think if you look at kind of how this election ended up working, whether or not there was fraud, there's always fraud. Every election is fraught with fraud.
Yeah, they put it in our faces. Then that's interesting. But go ahead.
Yeah, but if you look at who won, it wasn't the progressives. It wasn't the Democrats. It was the War Party. It was, for God's sake, I keep saying this. You did see that Joe Biden brought Cynthia McCain onto his transition team, right?
Well, he wrote the Patriot Act. He brags about that. But my husband was he was saying that he thinks that they'll be super moderate. That's Biden's there to be moderate, that even if they have complete control in DC, they'll be moderate so that Kamala can be president. And then they can go bananas after that. But if they're not, then she loses. The Republicans come and sweep it next time, presuming there's any way to actually have a even remotely fair election, and you still care about what people think vis-a-vis who you want to get elected, which I'm not 100% sure that that's true. But to the extent that you have to have people believing that the person is probably elected, that's where we are now. That's what keeps our democracy from completely breaking down. But yeah, I think that's right. That they it's like the 100 years since Dewey of dumbing us down, of taking out a lot of the critical thought and the comprehension of rhetoric and stuff from people's education. And they've gotten to the point where they're so dumb that, and I don't mean like people are really dumb, but we're so dumbed down. I ask people all the time, what do you like about Trump? And the number one answer is that he makes Democrats cry.
Yes,
I mean, that's just a crazy thing.
But there's so much
that I've had several times with different people. Donald Trump, people aren't following Donald Trump because of Donald Trump's personality. They're following Donald Trump because he's an avatar. He is the thing that is fighting against everything they hate. He's fighting against what's the identity politics.
He's not fighting against it. He's making it
but
much
it's an avatar. That's how
I don't
they
know
see
what
him.
that means.
It's like a puppet. Like he's filling the role that people want him. He's
right.
Anyone to be in that spot.
He would be a symbol, yes, but like an avatar that actually does stuff, like in a game, would have to would have to be successful, right?
Right.
Everything backfires for this guy. Everything.
But yeah, he is the symbol for these people of fighting against their very real enemies, like cancel culture, all of that.
What did he, Jessica? What did he try to do that he actually accomplished?
So, if he was elected in the first place to make liberals cry, He got them to walk backwards
Yeah.
into so much bullshit of their own making. It was like,
they're
oh
still
my God,
winning.
we don't deserve him. He's like a saint of making liberals cry. And what I wanted to say about that was make liberals cry is a statement fraught with meaning. It's actually something very layered. And it's not just the simple statement of I like seeing other people cry. It's you've been called a racist for the last 10 years just for existing. And now there's, that's drummed up a lot of animosity in a person who is struggling.
But he did that.
Yeah, I know. Well, okay.
So he created that on purpose.
So his take is that he is going to make the economy better. He cares about your jobs. He cares about you. And the
$4 trillion deficits.
I understand it. But what Cam is saying is like he presents that idea.
Yes, I do. But I understand what he's saying, but I'm asking you what Trump ever did that he didn't backfire.
Oh, okay.
But I guess if what you're saying is,
I agree with you as like as far as actual a policy, like actual policies that he got passed. So there are some like a couple of pharmaceutical things he did, like a couple of little things here and there that I actually thought were good things. I couldn't, if I had to come up with one off the top of my head.
No, but do you think that we are way closer to technocratic totalitarianism after this guy?
I don't think that's of Trump's making. I think that was done in response to Trump, not because of Trump.
I think that's why that's exactly, we are totally converging, because I think that's exactly why he was put in place.
Oh, wow. I have not considered that idea. That's definitely a new one on me.
That's definitely what I think.
But I do think that a lot of this was done. I totally think they bombed the economy just to get rid of Trump. Like I really do.
Oh,
I know
I
that
don't
kind of
think
puts
so.
a tinfoil. No, you don't think so? I do.
No, I think that they bombed the economy to completely transform the economy into a virtual world that they could control a whole lot better than all these people who could still walk around. I think this is
fascism.
Yeah, I think this is the guy, Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum guy, he established a fascist organization with the goal of merging governments and businesses, the World Economic Forum. This is their 50th anniversary, and the same guy is running it, and they talk about their goals. And that's why so they did this Event 201, which was a simulation of a novel coronavirus in October of 2019. And they said it would be 18 months. It would devastate the world economically. The stock market would go down by 40%, which is exactly what it did. That people would be scrambling for PPE, personal protective equipment, masks, vaccinations. They needed to make stockpiles. This was all a simulation in October 2019. And then the guy rolls out. This is a guy who already had in place his plan for the fourth industrial revolution. And then he just renamed it the Great Reset.
Right.
And now
think of the name.
Oh, yeah, the Great Reset. So now they're like, well, looks like everybody lost their jobs. But hey, guess what? Everybody now knows how to use Zoom. Let's convert it. And I think the very next step, where the critical next step is going to be DigiDollars, where you can't make any transactions that are not surveilled. And I think Trump facilitated all of this and in this theater, this distraction. And today was just like that big mob thing was a distraction. And now they're passing it without any process. We've totally abandoned process. And he did also lead the charge on that, because he never, and this is when he was running, I said, the guy never, ever refers to the Bill of Rights, ever, never. He doesn't care about it at all. And he doesn't care about process. And that's why when he says, I don't care what's right or wrong, I'm doing what I want, fuck you. And everyone's like, yeah, you tell him. I'm like, could backfire. I don't know. Well, so that's how I see it. That's why Cam's like, nobody sees it like you.
So what about this army? What about this absolute army of angry Republicans that they have now who feel that like these are real people? They're my neighbors. Like I've talked to them. They're actual people.
I think that they have now made them look like a bunch of racist hotheads, whereas Ron Paul made them look like a bunch of principled, rational people who would like to educate you and are willing to burn dollar bills in a talk about fraught with meaning. You got to really think about that. Like you see a bunch of college kids who got nothing, 3,000 of them burning dollar bills. You got to like, what? So it was interesting, and that's different.
One of the things that I wanted to say was when it came to Ron Paul accessed the intellectual side of people on the right. And that is where he did it. And if you look at the history of conservatism or Conservatism Inc., that is kind of how they've played it. Let's talk about the debt, the least sexy thing you could talk about ever. And all the while, you look at the progressive movement, and they're dealing strictly in moral superiority and emotions. And Donald Trump got up on the stage and said, yes, your anger is justified. I'm going to fight them for you. And that's where this came from. So we had this coronavirus thing happen, and then everyone's been locked into their homes. Unless they're in Florida, we're okay here. But we've been locked in our homes. People have lost their jobs. I know 4 or 5 people who've had family members commit suicide because they lost their jobs, because they had to be stuck inside.
I've seen a lot of murder suicide.
They have pushed these people who had been emotionally charged rather than trying to reach the principle, because you don't have to reach principle with progressives. You have to hit the emotional chord. And what Trump did is he struck that emotional chord. He said, you're right. They've called you racists. You're right. They've taken your jobs. They've canceled you. And Trump gave them the vehicle to go, you know what? Fuck this. And I do think there are a lot of angry people right now. And none of this surprises me.
But this is where I break. This is the big difference. And the Tea Party revealed they were the bridge to this. When Chris Christie was he rose to the governorship on the Tea Party coattails. Yep. And he, during that Hurricane Sandy, the Obama kiss, that October surprise, and all he did was pound the table for relief for probably, I don't know what New Jersey's up to these days, was probably one of the richest states. You know, if it were a country, it'd probably be per capita one of the richest countries in the world, I assume, because if it's proximity to the financial center, for him to pound the table, get all PO'd for FEMA, it clearly betrayed that he was a proponent of the power and promise of big government. So Ron Paul said, make the government smaller. You have control over your life and things will be better. You will have his closing speech in Congress was the most good for the most people is in liberty. But Trump picked up the Chris Christie thing and went further by saying, look, give up on all that stuff. You're never going to get a small government. You're never going to change anything. You couldn't get a job if you wanted to. They took it all away. This is the system as it is. This is the government as it is. I'm going to use it for you. I'm going to use it for you now. And that is just the stupidest thing. It's like, read Bastiat, The Law. It's so short. He says, you got to watch, or basically in the end, he says, you got to watch out that you don't like what you were saying, Jessica. You don't become what you are fighting against. Mm-hmm. And of course, in this case, when the Republicans are the Avis of the political parties, they are number 2. They only function in number 2 because they are the same welfare warfare superstate as the Democrats. But for the 50% of the people who don't want a totalitarian technocracy, they have to act like they are fighting the good fight. But once he's taken that, so the Democrats are really always going to be in the driver's seat. So the more you take away the filibuster, the more you call for a straight up and down 51-49 vote, the more you say big government's not bad if it's working for you, the more you say, well, I can fix this by changing trade policy. The more you do that, the more you just put all these arrows in the quiver of the next 12 years of Democrat rule. And the Republicans go right along with it. This way, the Republicans all get to vote against everything and keep the Democrats, just one seat above. Like, it's just, it always ends up this way. That's what upsets me, is that it always ends up this way, no matter what. And it wouldn't have with Ron Paul, because he would have educated people, and then they've been empowered.
Well, if you look at what's been going on, there are, like, Trump, look at the establishment Republicans. I think if you pay attention, you will see that almost none of the establishment Republicans actually wanted Trump. And then once he won, they started pretending that they were pro-Trump so that they could get the things that they wanted from Trump, because they know if I talk to Trump, if I bow and I kiss his feet and I speak well of him, I can get what I want. Rand Paul used that for our good, for the good of our war machine, to pull it back some. And then, but you can tell there are these weird things that Trump has done, like not bombing Iran, like talking about pulling out in Afghanistan. And you know that whoever gave Trump the idea to run for president, and I think Hillary Clinton egged him on because she thought he was an easy one to beat.
I thought that too at the time. You know, I thought he was there to lose to her. Like he was the only one who could possibly lose to her.
Well, I do think that she thought that. I think that she thought it because she didn't campaign the way she should have. She was surprised by it.
I'm more inclined to think she lost on purpose. Like that's how high up I think the control. But you know, I don't know. At that point, I don't know. I don't know how rigged it all is. I mean, I think they do fight legitimately to get their own power bases.
But so if you notice all of the anti-war rhetoric, it continued. No, we didn't lose wars. We got some drawdowns in some places and didn't start any new ones. Great. That's fantastic. I'll say good job, Trump, on not starting new wars.
Right.
I will.
That is another thing that people say.
Yemen. But that's the thing. You know, all of the establishment Republicans have been secretly not being never Trumpers, but are, because they're not getting their kickbacks from war. They're not, or quite as many kickbacks. They want that war machine oiled, ready, and going at all times. And
I'm sure Biden will deliver.
Yes, and that's what Biden is. He immediately started delivering, and you're going to see it. And that's why I try, when I'm on Twitter, every now and then I'll tweet at Donald Trump, and I try to appeal to his delusions of grandeur and his
everyone knows to do that.
Wanting to screw up the people who've come against him, because there are legitimate people who've come against him. And so every time I tweet, I'm like, hey, you know, it'd be really great is if you told the deep state to fuck themselves and brought all the troops home, so that if Biden wants to continue this stuff, it has to be on him. He has to restart it. So I'm like, come on, just screw him on the way out. Screw him on the way out. That has been my goal. And it's funny, there was someone, I may be wrong because it's been a while, but it was either Trump Jr. or someone else who was like, you know, I think you should pull these out just to screw these people. And I was like, tell that to your dad. Say it to your dad.
So if I can make two quick little points, as far as what we were talking about, the Trump supporters who may or may not have stormed the Capitol, to kind of leave it out, well, they've made them look like racists. Well, they already know that they look like racists. I don't think that they care. So I'm not as inclined to believe
I'm not saying
that.
Yeah. Okay. That today
this
was
isn't
racist.
Going.
Yeah.
No, I don't think that it is either. Right. I don't think there's plenty of people of color who were in that crowd, actually. But the fact that, yes, the media will paint this as racism. Of course they will. That's their play. That's always been their play. Even if that is their play, you've already disenfranchised these people and called them racists and kind of depersoned them in that way. They don't care anymore.
But is that what is caring about that what stops people from violence? Or is it principle?
No, it's not that. It's that they are not going to not do it because of what the establishment might say about them.
Right. I don't think so either, but I think they wouldn't do it because they have principles. Maybe
some people, maybe. The general populace, I'm not entirely sure. I think it's just a lot of angry people.
Yeah.
The second thing is that I don't credit Donald Trump with allowing Iran to slip the noose. This is my own personal.
That was Rand Paul.
I'm sorry?
I think it was Rand Paul.
That said that Donald Trump kind of like saved Iran or whatever.
No, anyway, it was Rand Paul that led that.
Sure. Okay. So what I do think is that you see a lot of countries in the Middle East right now making peace deals with Israel. And I think a lot of lines are being drawn right now between the surrounding countries in that area in favor of Israel and not in favor of Iran. And I don't necessarily think that just because we didn't see an invasion of Iran under the first term of Trump, that we wouldn't have seen it under the second. And I don't know that I can credit him necessarily with not invading Iran. I just don't think he got a chance to, personally.
I always thought he would invade Iran also. And then when that Soleimani thing happened and there were a lot of really weird events and Iran responded in a very strange way, I dug in a little bit to Rouhani's background and stuff like that. And I kind of think those guys are... I think they may be I think both sides may be playing a game over there. I'm not sure. Like, I'm not saying like, oh, it's obvious. I'm not sure. But I'm beginning to think, because that was so weird, that they may be playing a game, Iran and Israel, that allows the U.S. to go in and exert a tremendous amount of influence, make a lot of threats, put troops over there, every place in between. You know what I mean? It's like one side and the other. And if you didn't have, maybe they don't actually want to nuke the entire Middle East. Maybe they just want to take it all over without the war. And Iran seems to be playing into that, I think, possibly. And I think Soleimani may have been like a loyal Iranian and a real threat to that facade. But it's just a new theory because it was so weird to me how it played out.
And there's a lot of reason to think that that's true, only because the U.S. has backed forces in that country who would want to see the current regime overthrown for some very good reasons. I mean, they're like a repressive Islamic regime. They want to be able to join the rest of the world. So much like a Soviet Union that was on the precipice of collapse, there's a lot of U.S. money that ends up going into to support anti-government movements in Iran.
Yes. This is the thing that really, I always think of things as layers and puppet masters and stuff like that. But what you're pointing out is to separate in every country, in my opinion, in every single country, the elites, the people who can be bribed, all that from the people, from the country, from, you act like we always talk about that person as if they care about their country. So, and even Trump. Like, well, he wants to put America first. It's like, I sincerely believe that he wants to put Donald Trump Jr. first and everything. So like my husband was talking about what Biden wants. I said, what Biden wants is to make sure that $1 billion over in that hedge fund in China is safe and secure. That is all he wants. And he wants to make sure whoever his grandchildren get it. I don't know. Maybe he wants to be president. He is getting kind of old. Like, who knows what he thinks is left to achieve. This was probably it.
He thinks.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, right. But I think that was an act. But the whole thing to me is that underneath it all, like the people are talking about lizards and aliens and the Illuminati and all that, and it was Israel and Vatican, and the Vatican's probably closest to the truth on this. In that, I bet it's almost all, if not all, money and power. I mean, what Klaus Schwab is doing is really, concentrating the money in, I bet ultimately one guy could control it all the way Klaus Schwab is working towards this fourth industrial revolution. Like one guy with like an army of, I don't know what, AI or something, if you read Ted Kaczynski, he says like it's unclear whether a person will ever, like, I think that's where you get the Terminator stuff, which I love, that, you might need machines to run the machines, but I feel like they concentrate up to the top. There is that kind of plot and conspiracy, but almost all of it, I think, is what you're saying, which is they'll just sell each other out, sell their people out. All you have to do is get elected. Like that guy in Belarus, I think they were offering him like $1 billion to just do a COVID lockdown. And he was like, I'm not doing it. And I'm like,
it's not like incidental that these large amounts of money get handed over from the US or the IMF or any other wing of the Western.
Yes. Look into
NATO.
the Biden, Ukraine, John Kerry, Kolomoisky, which was the Privat Bank, who was Zelensky's boss. He was Zelensky's boss on TV the way Jeff Zucker was Trump's boss on TV. But the IMF sent billions of dollars over there, which went into that mix with Privatbank, which owned Burisma. And John Kerry was in on it. Biden was in on it. When you look at like that case and when you dig into some of the Hunter Biden stuff, you actually see how it works. You actually see like, oh, this guy owns that and they're getting this money and it's going to Cyprus and it's not coming back. And then that guy just declared bankruptcy and moved to Switzerland or whatever. And so there's a lot of that kind of investigation to be done. And it rarely sees the light of day.
That's why I think like so many people have this delusion that Trump is going to somehow get arrested. And I'm like, they can't arrest him because it sets a precedent that you would have to have presidents take responsibility for their crimes. And
they do. Some countries do it like that. Yeah, like France does that all the time. Christine Lagarde and the other, like they get brought up on charges, which is a little bit dangerous because then you have someone like, if Assad hadn't seen what happened to Gaddafi, he might have negotiated. But you don't see what happens to Hussein and Gaddafi and be like, so you want me to sign this and then we're friends?
No.
Okay. You just, you make the stakes too high. It was in de Tocqueville's thing about the American democracy in America.
Okay.
Where he said, like, it's good that you just have impeachment instead, it's just like a slap on the wrist and you lose your thing and that you don't have like beheadings because, they say that's what the 25th Amendment was for because JFK was killed by the deep state. And they were like, look, let's put a mechanism in there where you can just remove the president. You don't actually have to kill him. That's what they say that the 25th Amendment was for, to call him crazy. So it's really funny how on one hand, everybody acknowledges how deep and screwed up it all is. And on the other hand, they're just like, are you suggesting there's voter fraud? What are you? Some kind of tinfoil hat?
Yeah. That's like talking to my parents actually. And
what do they say? What are their views?
So
where do they come from?
It's really interesting. So I don't have a relationship with my mother, but I have an aunt who raised me, and then I have my dad. And my dad is like California blue liberal, and then my aunt is Georgia red Trump. And she's a poll worker. She, is really invested in the state as a whole. And today, I think she was watching the events unfolding and she called me and she's like, hey, just get ready. And I'm like, get ready for what? And she's like, to get out of the way if you have to. And I was like,
do you think she was looking through Democrat glasses when she saw the Republicans? Maybe she sees a guy like Cam walking in with a lot of big guns and she sees anger instead of joy.
She's the Trump supporter.
Oh,
she's
really?
the Trump supporter. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah. So when I say blue pilled, I just mean that she really buys into the system, because it's like the difference between in the Matrix, the red pill and the blue pill. The red pill, you're awake to what the system really is. The blue pill, you sort of go back to sleep believing everything is as it should be. She is very much everything is as it should be. It's fine. It works. It'll be fine. We'll all get along. She doesn't feel that way. And so that's why I see this sort of palpable change in the people I know that are Republicans. That is not the same as it was before. People are
my mom's a big Trump supporter. And she did not like him. We're from New York. She didn't like him before because of the way he treated Ivana.
Oh, fair enough. That's a good reason.
Yeah, but now she likes him. I'm like, why? Because he loves this country. I'm like, what are you? What the? Yeah.
Anyway. So I did think he answered that thing that people wanted from him, which is that he makes the people who have been attacking them upset, which is not just Democrats. It's the media establishment. It's the university establishment. It's every raging 20-something girl on Facebook. It's, the whole society has been telling them they're awful people for 10 years. So it's like, oh, well, the media made these people look bad with a psyop. Maybe they did that. I don't put it past them that they did that, but I don't think that these people care anymore. You can't make them look any worse. You've basically called them the worst thing you can be in America.
I feel like none of it, it was all there. I think it's going to go away completely now that they had the vote. That's what I think.
That would be so disappointing.
And that's why that would be kind of evidence that it was ginned up. And then, I mean, I shouldn't say completely. Somebody in the comments was saying, and I agree with this, that in the very beginning, that the whole point that they're going to, just keep this disgruntled subculture pissed off for the whole time. And it's just, there's no way to have two things. You have to have problems in order to have a state. You have to either have fiscal insecurity, in which case you want the welfare state, or physical insecurity, in which case you want the warfare state. Right. So they want people to always be tense and on edge. And then the second thing is, but they cannot do that in a functioning democracy, which is what we basically had, or democratic republic. So in 2000, they made lemonade out of the hanging Chad, to mix metaphors. I think that hanging Chad is like the best porn name ever, but it's an election.
And his
better than Silky Black Hog.
Right. Yeah, that is his partner. So I think that with the hanging Chad, what started then, it was like genius. I don't know if it was intentional or they ran with it or they set it up this way, but that's when the kind of not my president thing started. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And every single solitary presidential election has had lingering, widespread feelings of invalidness, invalidity, from the hanging Chad in 2000 to the Ohio dieballed voting machines in 2004. 2008 was the Kenyan birth. 2012, the birther issue continued with Obama. 2016, you would have had, this is the one thing that I think, like Trump, Hillary, and Ted Cruz, any one of those three could have won, depending on how the wind was blowing for the powers that be. They wouldn't have cared. And the reason I think that, because I used to think that he lost on purpose, then I thought she lost on purpose. But now I feel like they really kind of left it up to the people which flavor of, hemlock they wanted, Kool-Aid they wanted to drink, hemlock, whatever. And the reason I think that, the only reason, is that Ted Cruz had a serious disqualification. He was born in Canada at a time, to two parents who were Canadian citizens, at a time when dual Canadian American citizenship was not permitted. So he could not have been an American citizen. There was no way.
He's not a natural born citizen because his dad wasn't.
But even if one is good enough,
not originalist constitutionally.
Really? Oh, that's great.
Blackstone said, the understanding from Blackstone, I can't believe I'm doing Constitution talk.
No, that's
the
great.
Understanding from that day in the Constitution came from Blackstone's commentary, and the concept of a natural born citizen was that the citizenship came down through the father. So since Ted Cruz's father was from Cuba and then was in Canada, it didn't matter if he was born in America or to an American mom. Technically, he was never eligible to be president because he's not actually a natural born citizen.
So it doesn't matter even though he was born here.
He was not born here.
He was born
he was.
Canada.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. He was not born here. The fact that you don't know it is the actual issue. Is that
he's not eligible?
Why was he? He was winning primaries or coming close to. He was and nobody. The fact that he was a walking constitutional crisis was kept from the informed voter. And even if they wanted to say that father-mother thing was outmoded, the mother had to have been a Canadian citizen. She was natural-born American, but at the time of his birth, she had to have been a Canadian citizen and not an American citizen, because dual citizenship was not allowed at that time. And unless they prove that, but they never proved that she somehow had the one exception. So he was a walking illegitimate problem. Hillary, they completely set up, and boy, you could prove this all day long, that illegal immigrants vote. I've lived in and out of California for years, and I have known many people who are not qualified to vote who did vote. I had an au pair where she had within 30 days of living in LA, you have to get a driver's license no matter what. So she was not a citizen. She was never going to be a citizen. They basically, I don't know if she did it, if they literally insisted, but they practically insisted she register to vote. She was like, I'm not a citizen. I cannot vote. And they were like, just do it. Just do it. I mean, so there's no chance that tons of illegal immigrants, which I always like, you know what, if California wants to throw away its electoral votes, then let them. I don't really care if that's a decision they are making. I was like, whatever. But the Georgians are not making that decision, and their electoral votes have been stolen from them, in my opinion. But so all three. So now that really weak Russian influence thing, weak crap. That so Trump is the least legitimacy issues, but still there were legitimate issues. Now, and I mean, I'm talking 2004, 08, 12, 16, and now 20. This is the most illegitimate of all. No matter who wins, it's totally, it will have the feeling of complete invalidity. You could literally have two presidents like you have two popes.
Well, at that point, do you not simply talk about decentralization or secession?
I think that's what they want us to do.
I don't necessarily think that that's a bad idea. Clearly, there are at least two countries trying to live together as one. And it's simply not working. So I support decentralization.
Me too. Yeah, I absolutely think we should secede. We could even just nullify laws. We could do all that. But when I came to that conclusion, which is the only conclusion to come to, because I'm so far down the rabbit hole, I had to wonder if they want me to think that.
You never can be too sure. You never can be too sure.
We are in a simulation of a simulation. I don't know.
I think it's healthy to question why we think the things we think.
Well, maybe they want a civil war. They know they're going to win. They got to give you hope that it's going to happen. They got to give you a reason to fight if they want to. Think about the South after the Civil War. You think you're getting Ron Paul after that?
If you've got enough reason to fight, you've got a chance to win. It's never hopeless. If you've got something to fight for, it's not hopeless. And
yes, I agree with you there.
Look how far people got.
They may just be so arrogant.
They are, and they think that we're all stupid, and they think we won't do anything. And the worst thing you could be is just sort of black-pilled or depressed or think that you've lost. Like, that's really what they want you to think, is that you have no hope. Yeah. So if you have some kind of hope, right, that you can change things, then you're already sort of bucking the system, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, no, I agree. It's not hopeless. And the reason it's not hopeless is, or like even from my point of view, they have to constantly pipe deception into our eyes and ears constantly, in regular media, in social media, everything constant. They must control our minds 24/7 or we'll take a breath. That's why they gave out the Obama phones.
They did that in the Soviet Union. I haven't read that yet, so I don't know the reference, but I will read it. They did this in the Soviet Union, and everybody knew that it was bullshit. Like, whenever the government would put things out, the whole planet, as far as like the Russians go, the whole planet knew that it was nonsense, and they didn't buy any of it. So we are coming to a point where it's kind of like, nah, we're not buying the line anymore.
That's why we have been at a disadvantage, because for a long time they got to use our faith in the media against us. So the transition happened long before our eyes opened, but still, I mean, people are still getting brainwashed by it up the wazoo. But that's why I always, it occurred to me that truth in advertising, that's terrible laws. Insider trading laws, they're terrible laws. And the FDA, it's all terrible, because all of a sudden you've given up all of your responsibility and any sense of responsibility, any experience, any cultural knowledge, any family wisdom on evaluating drugs or how to live and all that stuff. You completely relinquish it. And then all that power, which corrupts, absolutely, then they have the power to do something like COVID, where people are just like, I don't know what to do. I think I'll put a bag on my head and stay in the closet. It's like, you should probably breathe fresh air and go in the sun. You're fucking crazy. Like, well, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I was frozen for 500 years, and I came out and I was just like, these people don't know about sun, and air, clean water, good nutrition.
That's what's interesting about this coronavirus deal is everyone keeps talking about 1984 and how Orwellian it is. But I think you do have to take 1984 and you have to marry it to Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Because Jessica's talked about in the past.
Help me make that connection because I haven't read the book yet.
Because the way Jessica's spoken about this in the past is the origin of the word amuse is to be...
I got that from Brit. I can't claim credit. That's Brit's thing.
But that I believe ties very well into the Brave New World, because there's in Brave New World there's a drug called Soma that they can take and forget about everything and be happy. Mm-hmm. And it's all about maximizing happiness, putting people in all the right boxes where they fit. But if you look at it at the world that we live in right now, it does seem like there's a split between people who they're trying to control with tyranny and with, heavy-handed, and then there are the people that are already controlled, who've been amused, who have
Facebook
been
and
overcome with
Prozac.
pleasure, mm-hmm. and do exactly what they want them to do without any question. And so I think if you just go 1984, you're missing the other half, which is Brave New World.
Totally thought it was Brave New World. But I get what you're saying. And I would always make this analogy, like everybody's got, they have the pairs of things, like Russia had sex and vodka. We have Facebook and Prozac. The Brazilians have called the basket. So they get like a basket of food and necessities and novellas. So they just watch soap operas all day. I had a Brazilian friend who said that. So there was all this stuff. And I always equated it with the Soma thing. So you had the people, the next generation, just completely plugged in voluntarily to the matrix. That's why people are like, you're going to get an RFID. I'm like, you don't need an RFID. No one can walk around without a phone. You go find your RFID. Like you don't pull it out. You don't have to cut it out of your hand. You will not walk away without it. So they put all that in place, Brave New World completely in place, but there is the remnant, the resistors, and they need the boot on the neck, but not forever.
Right.
Not forever.
No.
Because,
until they're reconditioned.
Yeah, in that Great Reset thing, they do say there is going to be the tunnel people, the people who live outside who couldn't handle the technocracy. And in every dystopian movie, I absolutely love the sci-fi, from Total Recall to The Matrix to Demolition Man. I mean, they will have the people in the tunnels. That's what the boot's for. But everybody else gets the Soma.
Yep.
What encourages me is that the heroes of those movies are the people who destroy those systems. So we have an entire generation of people who grew up knowing that the heroes were the people who sabotaged the machines. And I think that the time has come.
Well, if you're going to sabotage the machines, you've got to learn how to grow stuff, which I really can't. I'm too old. I don't feel like it. I don't know.
So if you have other things to trade, that would be good. Coffee and vodka are going to be big commodities. Cigarettes.
I don't need much. I'm going to go with I don't need much. I can keep the cave clean or whatever. Just give me a broom.
Ruling the cannibal horde, so I'll make sure to take care of you.
I will, thank you. I will sweep out the cave for a couple of, and I'll just eat the marrow out of the bones. I'm good with that. That's a deal.
Monica, we're keeping her.
That's my plan. Thank you. I just have visions of like the Star Trek, the chicken that like the cave, the fur toga and like a chain around her neck. Like just put her in the cave to throw her bone once in a while.
No, you would be a revered woman in my cannibal clan, by the way.
Thank you.
Yes.
Maybe I'll be the voice. Maybe I can be in the background. Cam will have the comic relief and I can narrate what's happening.
Let me ask you, this comment makes me think of something. I despise with my whole heart every single time I see Joe Biden or Kamala Harris talk about we're going to come together, we're going to unite, we're going to unify. Do you actually know anyone on either side that wants to unite with the other? Because
I don't want
off to no end. I don't know.
And the funny thing is, the ideology is closer than ever. The welfare warfare superstate is merging. It's just becoming this one amorphous thing that everybody kind of is like, well, I want my UBI. No, I want my subsidized manufacturing job. It's like, okay, but you're all just asking for a totalitarian state with little nuances.
I mean, I'm willing to have a Medicare conversation if we can talk about ending the global warfare. Like, I mean, I'm even willing to have conversations, but you can't have conversations anymore. Like, the lines have been drawn. We're past the point of talk. It's just not there anymore.
Yes.
The warfare thing isn't going to stop, but it will move
the health
to the
of
virtual.
the state. Yeah, the health of the state depends on warfare. If they stopped doing the warfare, our prosperity would disappear. So it's not like they can stop it. So even if we demanded that or wanted that or whatever, it would.
I have a book I just got called The Military Roots of the Internet. And it's new. It's like from 2018. And I knew about it, but this guy, I mean, I don't know what his story is, but it's good, and it's making me realize that the internet is a war, the whole thing, it's a war weapon. So it's a weapon of war. And I mean, I'm not very far into the book, so I have to wait to have all my thoughts synthesized on it. But
yeah.
If it gets totally virtual, like they're heading us into, and control is virtual, I mean, imagine the power of not actually needing to build stuff to have that, the power that war will bring. I don't know. I mean, I can't even imagine. It's because what he's talking about now is like the Phoenix program in Vietnam, and this where even before the Phoenix program, they used assassination, migration, and starvation to subdue the population. And that's
what they're doing in Yemen.
Yeah. And I feel like they did it to keep them, or what he says, they did it to just keep them from having the energy to figure it out or fight back. And I feel like that's why we're Brave New World in the end, is that it's going to be virtual, and you're just not even going to know to fight back. You're not even going to know what's happening. I mean, it's a weird vision to have. And maybe I'm overreacting. Like maybe that's what the whole Fourth Industrial Revolution stuff is meant to make you really have your eye on a ball that's like so far away. There's nothing you can do about it, instead of looking at what's real close. You guys should check out Alison McDowell, Wrenching the Gears. She was just an education activist, and she discovered they want to, I don't know, blockchain social services and they have to create data they can monetize and literally trade in the financial markets. I don't know. It would take me a long time just to plow through her stuff. But the ideas, they make me think that we're not seeing what's right in front of our faces, which goes back to what you were saying earlier, Jessica, about it just comes down to the money, and that's how they're controlling everyting. I don't know. Mm-hmm.
Well, no, it always comes back to money.
I guess. A lot of people will say it goes up to the lizard people. You know what I'm saying? It always comes down to the money. That's what I'm saying. Like everything else might be the distraction. It's just fucking follow the money.
So is Brave New World Aldous Huxley?
Yes.
Okay, so interestingly, I heard a really good quote by him. Have not read Brave New World, but I heard a really good quote by him about how Orwell feared that we would have information hidden from us, but Huxley feared that there would be this over plethora of information that you couldn't discern what was going on, because there were so many amusements and types of information, and nobody agrees on what reality is. And I was like, wow,
boy,
that's he hit it a lot closer to the head than Orwell did, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, and in Brave New World, it was a mixture of the two. It was you have all of the things that make you happy, pleasurable, all the information you want, but the Bible's hidden. The Quran is hidden. You can't have these concepts, especially the Bible, where it has this undercurrent of personal responsibility, of individualism. And so, I mean, it's very interesting. But one of the things, like Paul's comment here about alcohol licenses and business licenses, I've been looking at this because I now live in Florida, and I just bought a couple of guns, and I had to wait.
Can we see them? Do you happen to have them handy?
I mean, I have two of them handy, but
the ones you bought today.
When's
it going to be illegal to show guns on YouTube?
I think as long as I don't show you the inner parts of them.
Oh, really?
We're good. Like if I don't show you how they work, I think that's.
I've seen a bunch of shooting videos on YouTube.
Yeah, shooting videos are
Yeah.
fine. I think it's if you take them apart and show how they work, they don't like
Right.
that.
Oh,
But
interesting.
since I'm here now, if I get a concealed carry permit, then I can get the gun the same day. But I have to go through a class. I have to get pictures taken. I have to have my fingerprints done. I have to pay this, I think, exorbitant amount to get the thing. And I'm sitting here, and like if you look at what's going on with coronavirus, they'll just say, "Oh, well, you no longer have a license to sell liquor. You no longer have a license to do business." And
Question.
what's up?
Is the exorbitant amount that you have to pay for this license more than the cost of a 3D printer?
No.
Good question.
Because you can't stop the signal.
Wait, let me just.
You
turn
see
this
what I'm
way.
saying?
What's that?
Do you
back
see what
there?
I'm saying?
Is
Okay.
Is that a 3D printer?
Right.
Oh,
Right.
nice.
But my point is, I hate licensure across the board. Like I shouldn't tell people this. I now, for the first time since 2018, I have a valid license plate on my car because it came with the car that we bought.
That's bold.
What? You drive around without a valid license plate?
Oh man.
I despise
You must not have any drugs in the
paying for a
car.
license. No, I don't.
How do you get away with
Right.
You
He doesn't have any
watch-
drugs in the car, so if he gets pulled over, it's no big
But
deal.
does he? Do you get pulled over? I think I would get pulled
Oh,
over
no.
within one day in LA. I live in
Dude,
LA.
The last time like I said, but until this new car, the last time I got a license plate was in 2017, and it expired in 2018. And so until the end of 2020, I drove around here. I drove around in Georgia. I drove around in Pennsylvania. I drove around in Alabama and didn't get pulled over once. And
Wow.
the simple
It's probably
reason
'cause
I've
you're
never
white.
been pulled over. No, it's because
I mean that.
It's because
Can you
when I
imagine?
But when I drive and I see a
True.
cop, I go away. I don't give them the
Yeah.
chance to read my plate.
Yeah. Oh,
But-
good. Yeah, that's great.
That works until it doesn't, though.
Yes.
Right. Hey, I'm the champ so far. But but that's the thing. I hate licensure, and so one of the things that really bugs, like when I was in Birmingham, I had a concealed weapons permit, and I literally just walked in. They did a background check, and I paid $7 for a 5-year gun concealed carry permit. But all of this information, taking my fingerprints, all of that just makes me go, this is a secret gun registry.
Mhm.
And I don't want to do it. And I really hate accepting licenses for my rights. And so like there's this part of me, this autistic libertarian part of me that's like, I'm not going to get the license. I'm not going to get the license. I'm not going to get the license.
So I don't think you need a concealed carry in Georgia, just by the way. I'm going to look that up just to be sure. But I think in Georgia, you don't have
that's why I never liked the idea of medical marijuana. You have to register. And I saw it in Hawaii. I don't know if it passed or what, but they were proposing that anyone who had a medical marijuana license was not allowed to get a gun.
Yeah, I think they've already had an issue trying to enforce that on somebody too. I think I've heard of the case in possibly Florida. Cam, you might know about that.
I do not.
Yeah, I'll have to look that up myself.
Divided we fall,
That's
united
good.
we stand was the biggest propaganda sold to us since kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like probably the biggest
is a bullshit line.
Yeah, the biggest lie in American history is "we the people."
Yes, I think Patrick Henry objected to that. I love him. He's my favorite. He said it should have been the states. He said, "We the people" makes it sound like we're subjects of this nation and not that the Constitution was a contract among the states.
Right.
Well, it also sells the lie that we're the ones who are ruling. It sells the lie that if the government does it, it's because we told them to, or because we did it. And it's like, I mean, I think that's basic. Was that Anatomy of the State? Rothbard talks about how some populations kill themselves if we apply that to every country.
Yeah. If 70% of the population voted to kill 30% of the population, well, then you couldn't say, of course, that they committed suicide. Like, we wouldn't belabor the point saying that 30% committed suicide.
That's fantastic.
So that debunks the idea that we are the people entirely. And then that throws into sharp relief what the state actually is. Because what the state pretends to be and what the state actually is are two different things. Everyone should read Anatomy of the State by Murray Rothbard. There's a free PDF on Mises.org or a free audiobook on YouTube. And the book's only 90 pages if you want to read it. Please read that book.
I think I have that one on audio, so I'll grab that. I have a lot of those. Mises, the audio stuff is like free. I mean, I don't know if it's actually free, but it's close to free.
Quite a lot of it is free.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mises is great, and I support them like unequivocally. They're a fantastic organization, and they make so much like libertarian literature free and available to anyone.
Yeah,
so
it's good.
Please go visit that, you guys. Yeah.
Yeah. Mises is good. Am I the only one, though, who thinks that the Bill of Rights was a mistake?
I don't think it was a mistake.
In what way?
Because
what do you mean?
It limited our rights. And now
there was someone who took that position, right? Who was that?
Right. That this is all that humans have, and it's I can't tell you. This is just my brain. Every time I think about it now, because I used to be a huge proponent.
Oh, that was a real issue.
But yeah, I despise when people talk about their Second Amendment rights. You don't have Second Amendment rights.
Right.
You have the natural right to self-defense. Period.
I can tell you why I disagree with that. That was, I think, the original argument. And then George Mason wrote the Bill of Rights, I guess, for Virginia, if I recall correctly, and they adopted it. And the reason I don't agree with that is you can't think of the Bill of Rights as the Bill of Rights, like an exhaustive list of your rights. Obviously, it isn't. They're almost not, very few of your rights are listed. What it is express restraints on the government put in terms of rights. No, it totally hasn't worked, but I shouldn't say that. I think it has slowed down the march of tyranny, and it is possible that all of individualism, all of individual liberty is just a constant struggle to kick that can of tyranny forever. And that if you get 250 years out of the very best possible plan, or actually I would say we got, I think the real turning point was World War I. So where it was just the writing was on the walls over. But that was also the turning point for the monarchies and stuff, which actually weren't that bad, I think, compared to what we have now. But anyway, so I think it did.
I agree with everything that you're saying right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially about like some of the monarchies where
I know read?
People freak out when you say that. So I'm familiar with some of the writing. I haven't read anything to completion, but just like essays and things like that.
If you read, just get Democracy, the God That Failed, and just read the beginning, because that's what got me on hot. Like what I just said to you, and you're like, yes. I was like, I didn't even know about Mises, and I somehow stumbled upon this, and I was like, yes. And then that was it for me. So it was just like the first 20 pages. Just open the book.
That book has been recommended to me like 5 or 6 times now, so I definitely have to.
People think it's intimidating. List. Just read the first 20 pages. I mean, I actually I did not find it intimidating. I thought it was freaking great. You might not want to like spend all your time reading all the footnotes, but what I did was I bought a lot of the books that that were in the footnotes, and that was that was fun. I now have probably like 100 books from Mises. I think I have them all. I would say it's possible I have them all.
The book list gets long. I mean, I haven't.
I'm saving them
for the.
I'm saving them for the tunnels. I'm going to be the librarian.
There you go.
I forgot.
There you go.
A revered woman and a librarian.
Oh, but I talk too much. Oh.
In the post-apocalypse library is not going to be the same as the pre-apocalypse library.
It's not going to be as quiet.
To that. Yeah, it's not going to be as quiet at all. Like,
give up on that.
Yeah.
I said I don't mind being chained in the corner and just eating the marrow out of the bones, but I actually do need a little quiet to read.
This is what we do to librarians anyway.
I have a library chained in my basement right now.
But so let me just zoom back a second, because when I say that the Bill of Rights was a mistake, I'm not necessarily even talking about government, because they're always pushing it to the nth degree. How far can we go before they push back, etc. But it's a mistake in the mind of the culture, because whether or not the government does anything, people see their rights as this limited list of things. And if you talk to anyone who's a constitutionalist, you would there's some that are smarter, obviously, but there are people who I've talked to who are strict constitutionalists and not originalists necessarily, but truly believe that their rights are what are on those pages.
I would be a textualist, not an originalist.
That's where their rights derive from, is what people think that their rights come from the government.
Yes.
And that's why I think it's a mistake.
But you can't. We're that far gone because we're that far gone. It's not a better alternative to have left it out, because they left it out at first. It was a negotiated victory on the part of, I think, George Mason to put it in. Virginia was not going to sign it without the Bill of Rights. So
they never should have signed the Constitution.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure everybody did, to be honest with you. And there was no mechanism in the Articles of Confederation to replace itself. Like the Constitution just came out, and it has no legitimacy in my opinion. But whatever, I'm fine with if we could just restore it, I'd consent to it as a compromise position. But I have thought a lot about the Bill of Rights issue, and I understand what you're saying, and I totally agree. And I used to have this argument on the air all the time, because people would call and they would talk about terrorists have no rights and Gitmo and all this shit, the real hardcore, and I would trap them, because they are just the people who would say God gives you your rights, not the government, because that's where they were. And I would say, so if God gives you your rights and not the government, why do non-Americans not have the same rights? And actually it's a little bit of a trick question, because those rights are really just restraints on the government against actions they can take against an individual. And I think the 14th Amendment, actually, which was not constitutionally passed, would some things I like about it, some things I don't, but it incorporates the rights into the states, which I do not like. I think the Congress should not pass a law to abridge religion, but that doesn't mean that your state house can't have the 10 Commandments on it, I think, but that's how it's read. But the 14th Amendment did say that people have rights. People have the rights regardless of their citizenship status. So that was a little bit of a nod.
Yeah. Well,
doesn't that sort of imply that God create? Sorry.
Go ahead.
I just had a joke, which was that doesn't that sort of imply that God created rights 250 years ago?
Yes, it makes no sense. It's just yes.
Well, and that's the thing is, when it comes to conversations about rights, I mean, at the end of the day, you could say that you don't have any rights that you're not willing to personally defend. I mean, there's all kinds of conversations about this.
Yes. I think there's only one right, the right to self-defense.
Yeah, or property.
I agree.
No, the right to property as an extension of the person, but there's only one right, and it's the right to self-defense. And that means
you have to be
right
able to protect that property.
The right to autonomy.
If you're self-ownership.
Right.
It all boils down to property rights.
Yes. And the one thing that is the only real question, in my opinion, is how do you originate or transfer ownership of land? Sorry, Cam, you're trying to get a point out, aren't you?
No, I'm good. How do you transfer property of land?
No, I'm saying the only question that I really, in the end, have, there was a school of thought called the Georgists. I think Thoreau might have been a Georgist, and maybe even Thomas Paine. I don't know, but where it's everything we believe: total autonomy, individuality, private property, all of that. But they do not believe that human beings can
own land,
thoroughly own pieces of the earth. Because where did that right of ownership to pieces of the earth come from? And I would say there are a lot of cultures who recognize that implicitly in the fact that they are roaming around killing animals and stuff, and they are like, don't understand what you're saying. Like, you build a fence and say it's my property, and they're just like, what do you mean? My squirrel just ran over there. I gotta go get that. I gotta go shoot that and then get it. Like, because like in Peru, I was in Peru, and there's a bunch of like Indians in the mountains. I had a friend who was a missionary priest, and they could no longer live because a big power plant came up or something came up, and they built a fence around like 30 acres of land. And they were like, well, the animals can't walk around it. We used to just sit around and wait for a deer to walk by or whatever they have and kill it and eat it. Now, granted, that's not the most efficient use of land. And if be fruitful and multiply is all, is the ruling thing. I'm not saying I have the answer. I'm just saying I understand it's a valid question. And I personally is the one question I think is the legitimate point of difference among, political ideology.
Well, I mean, I think go ahead.
I was going to say, this actually goes back to that discussion we were having about the non-aggression principle the other day. Like, a lot of people talk about, like, so Locke addresses what you were saying, Monica, by saying that you own something by a man generates ownership or wealth by mixing his labor with his environment.
Soil with the toil. And toil with the soil.
Right. So does that include, if I've put a fence up around this area, I've mixed my labor sort of with this area.
I'm not even sure.
Can you claim the whole earth that way? Right.
I got an email from Hoppe once because I asked him about the Peru. I came back from Peru. They sent an email to Hans Hermann Hoppe, and he was like, well, they should build their own fences. I was like, that doesn't work. But I'm not even talking about the fences. I'm not even sure you own the land through agricultural development.
Okay.
Like, I'm not even sure that mixing your toil with the soil is enough for you to say, I own this land and I can leave it fallow and pass it on to future generations who can also leave it fallow. I'm not sure. Where do you get that right? The only thing that makes it work is the rule against perpetuities. Kim, are you a lawyer? Did you go to law school?
Me? No.
Or Jessica? Did anybody?
No.
I thought he was whipping out Blackstone. I was like, okay. So
no, I was just a nerd.
There's a rule against perpetuities, which means there's a certain amount of time that you can't make rules about the property you leave to your heirs. And that's the only way this works. That because eventually it can only really be owned by living people, and there's enough kind of to make that work. But if you remove that rule, you can see the problem. There have been 123 billion people on Earth. If somebody was allowed to control it beyond their temporal existence, then there would be nothing. You couldn't grow anything anywhere. So like, there's an ultimate problem. And Norman Dodd, who worked on the Reese Commission, said, which was about, are tax-exempt foundations un-American? He said they are, and they should have a rule against perpetuities. Think of like the Rockefeller Foundation, the World Economic Forum, all these Carnegie, all these things, they live forever and they have unlimited money.
You say Mickey Mouse. Yeah.
Yep.
Disney.
So that's why kind of my take is that you own it if you can defend it. And so, you will lose property that you can't defend. That's why you lock your door. It's, any number of things. Cause
but how about this? So is it valid to say that taking what you got, like you live in this country, you can't pretend that we live in a free society or an anarcho-capitalist or agorist or anything. We can't pretend, right? So you're Ted Turner and you own like 25% of the land in the United States, and you have fences and you have guys who can defend it. And you also have the United States Air Force and our tax dollars, which are, defending it from some foreigner who would come in and helicopter down and, whatever. So would you say you are defending it by just legally getting title and knowing that you don't physically have to defend it if somebody, you can leave it fallow forever and give it to your children who could also leave it fallow. No one's allowed to come on there, and you're not really physically defending it.
So so leaving it go fallow is subjective, because if you value nature in its natural form or green spaces or whatever it is, maybe leaving land go fallow for one man is preserving it for another. And so I would say that, it would be you would be hard pressed to say that what one man does with his land should be determined by the subjective value of anybody else. And then the other thing is, if he does have the ability to defend that land by having the resources to hire private security for it, then that's just an extension of his.
But what if he doesn't?
So if he doesn't, then he doesn't. It's for the same reason. If I'm hiking through area that happens to belong to Ted, and I trespass on it by hiking on it, he can't do anything about it. And
he can, though. He can call the cops on you.
Can he? Does he know that he has to know that I'm there?
But I'm asking you, just theoretically, if you maybe, just theoretically, if like I rent my house and I own a little house in the Coachella Valley that we Airbnb out. And if there's ever a problem there, I'm nowhere near that. Right. I imagine the people I Airbnb would just call the cops.
Right.
There's a problem in this area. I'm calling the cops. People call the cops all the time on people who Airbnb. So, but I'm not actually able to defend it. But I can own a lot more land because the government defends it for me. Theoretically. Now that might not be true.
You do actually technically defend it because your doors have locks. You probably maybe have an alarm system even on your so there are things that you do to the home that are sort of reasonable defenses for the society that we live in. If we lived in like a war-torn society, you might have private security guards or some other kind of thing.
We're getting to the answer. I can own a lot more property in this system that has these rules about property ownership than I could if I had to physically defend it, because we've agreed that it is possible for me to own that property in theory, that you don't have a right to encroach it. It's not that I have a demand to, but see, I feel like this is demonstrating how tricky a question it is.
So it definitely does. I think that there are interesting answers that I don't know 100% for sure would work. But I think people have fielded this, such as David Friedman and Bob Murphy, who have talked about the way that like private security forces and property might be conflicts about property might be dealt with in sort of more of an anarchic system, or at least like a stateless system. So they explain these things way better than I do. And you would definitely have to go through arbitrators that both parties agree on, and there would still be some kind of system in place. But they could be private systems that aren't necessarily dictated by a government, which is incentivized to its own purposes and things of that nature.
Yeah, no, I do understand, but I want to pull up Ryan's thing that says it's a leftist cop-out.
So what is? I'm sorry.
Pull up Ryan. It's a couple above that.
Oh, wait. Oh, Ryan's comment. I wasn't looking. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, Cam put it there on the thing, and then he took it down.
I think it was Paul.
It's up. No, it's at 8:47. No, it says it's up here. I can see it. It says water ownership can be just as straightforward. There's nothing physical that can't be owned. To say that one thing can be owned and another can't is a silly leftist cop-out. And then he suggests Water Capitalism by Walter Block. Which actually, I was on a podcast with him, and we promised to be continued. I wanted to talk to him about limited liability corporations, and I'll also talk to him about water. And when I was in law school, I took a class on water rights, and it was a highly cultivated, or whatever, it emerged from the different, like water in a place that's arid has different rules emerge than water in place that there's a lot of water. And I feel like the reason, I'm not advocating government, but I think the reason that you have dispute resolution, so courts or any society. So I believe in society. I think it's clear that we're social. Like if you read Our Enemy, the State, he talks about like governance versus the state.
Right.
You have dispute resolution mechanisms, and the reason legitimate disputes can arise, where both people legitimately think that they have the rights, is that there's nuance in law, that it is not the same as like math. That's why I wasn't great at it. I got a JD MBA, but like I was much better at the Excel spreadsheets than I could never be a jurist. I could never be a judge, because there's nuance there. And when you, so that's what a judge is for, to see. That's why the common law is so good. Like the English common law is a concept, which is, it's a great way to not have statutory law or a lot of enforcement. It's that, and why I like tort law, is that they take case by case and you look at the specifics of the case and you understand the fundamentals of the justice in that case. And then that allows you to build a society on those understandings. And you don't have another case until the case teases out a nuance that has not yet arisen. And that's why when they're like, we need a new law, we need fundamental legal architecture, I'm like, you know what? We're 10,000 years into this. We've pretty much teased out all the nuances. And don't tell me terrorists are not privateers, pirates. They are. They're aggressive actors that are not associated with the state, that cross borders. I mean, we've seen it all. So I feel like the water law is a good example of how the property ownership is going to emerge in a way that's a little more nuanced than just, I built this, I weaved a bracelet out of my own hair. Like there's absolutely no way anyone else can own that. I didn't do anything. All I did was grow, say I was just nursing from my mother and my first baby hair became a bracelet. That's an item that doesn't involve anything else. I clearly own that. But when you go to like water, I think it can be nuanced.
So I agree with you that especially water, because it's a tricky thing because it flows over everyone's property and all those kinds of things, it can be tricky. But I agree that disputes would arise, much like disputes arise now, and that they would need to be arbitrated. But we can have private arbitration that both parties agree to, and it wouldn't necessarily function that differently than the state agree. I don't believe in coercive.
No, I'm just saying the origin of the right to own land and water is a nuanced question, because the rules of perpetuity, should the rules of perpetuity exist? Like, would Ryan say the rules of perpetuity should exist? Because that limits your ability to control property long after your own death. Like, where are the limits? Where's the origin? And what are the limits of land? Because if everybody could own land forever, we would not be able to eat.
Okay, so something that's really coming to mind a lot during this conversation is when people died of the plague in 1358, and we're talking in some sections of Europe, 70 to 60% of an area would be completely wiped out, meaning that their homes and their farms and all of their like capital goods were just there. A lot of people kind of just moved in and took ownership of those things by mixing their labor with those things that were just laying there. I don't think that those were ill-gotten gains.
Oh, totally agree.
Right. Agree. So, no, they didn't buy that property from anybody else.
No, I'm just talking about the earth.
Right.
I'm talking about land. Like, do you own it all the way to the core of the earth and all the way to, does it stop at the atmosphere? Does it stop at another star? Like,
well, it's like ridiculous.
Maybe it's obvious and I'm just not seeing it.
You could never, it's sort of because you could never reach that. You could never reach the core of the earth as technology stands now, and you could never reach a star. So obviously, like your property rates don't extend.
Yes, I will. And actually, like with an airplane going over my head, I'm not sure they're allowed to spew their crap on me. And if I am farming the land, I would say that I own it. But I'm just like, I think if George Washington was a land speculator. And I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's, I know what the answer should be. I understand what the answer should be. I can't intuit it.
So one
Well, I
thing
think-
that comes to mind. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think you own, like, I don't want to speak for Ryan in particular, but I would say, knowing him as well as I do, I would say that he believes you own something until you abandon it. So
Okay.
laws of perpetuity, when you're dead, you've abandoned that property.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you've passed it to your child, they then would have the choice to abandon it or continue its use. And so it is a transfer between individuals. It's from father to son, and if they don't keep it, they abandon it.
What about this idea that, like, George Washington was this, people thought it was reprehensible what some of these guys were doing, just massive land speculators, and they would just stake a claim. They would go out and, let's say this is what they did. They would go out and they would build a fence just for miles and miles and miles all the way around and say, that's mine.
Yeah.
And then, go away. And I'm not 100% positive that's the way you originate the rights in land. That's really all I was saying.
So I think, and I agree with you, I don't think you can just go and put a fence up around the whole world and say, okay, this is mine now because I put a fence on it. Because obviously I can jump over your fence pretty easily and you're not going to know I'm there.
But could they arrest you if they did know you were there?
So yeah, that's a problem, I think, where we might agree that the state enforcing property rights for people who, just do a thing like that, which is obviously you're not defending something, you're not using it. You just showed up one day, put a stake on it, and then walked away forever.
Actually, the U.S. government does it. It's the U.S. government that does it the most. If that'll make people feel better if I say that. 44% of the land in the country is the U.S. government saying that they get it. And there are a lot of laws about squatting and that kind of thing, which I was always raised to abhor, that you could 30 years into it, if nobody touched that land and somebody was farming it you didn't realize that they were farming it for 15 years, it might be theirs. Mm-hmm. That is a legal concept. And I was raised to abhor it, but when you really, that's why the law gets a little nuanced. But the fact that the U.S. government has decided that they own 44% of the landmass in this country, that makes it pretty clear what would give them the right to originate that. They are not an entity, but if they were,
you would need the state to enforce something like that. Like it would require the state to come along and say, well, you have to leave now. Because even though you've taken control of this land and clearly you own it and you've mixed your labor with it, I want to claim some kind of like legal technicality that removes you from it. And you would need some kind of state entity to enact that, I think. So I think the problem, much like most problems, kind of, or some big guns. Yeah, I mean, there would be conflict. Think about Michigan and Ohio. There's a little sliver of land right between Michigan and Ohio where they connect.
Yeah, you're right. War.
They had a war over it. There was a war between Michigan and Ohio. That's where I grew up, was Michigan. Yeah. So there would be conflict, but I think the types of conflicts that arise organically out of those types of things would pale in comparison to the types of things that the U.S. government perpetrates on its people, or the land grabs that they do. Millions of acres were grabbed in pursuit of building the wall.
I guess this
eminent domain, civil asset forfeiture. I mean, they're robbing us blind.
I used to think that it was okay for colonizers to come occupy the land here, because the Indians weren't really making efficient use of it. It seemed like they weren't owning it because they weren't cultivating it. But what they were doing was something a little different. Some places they would permaculture, or the way, the native methods of changing the patterns or following the herds or whatever. Like they're even in the earliest times. I just read this book, Against the Grain, which was great. The earth was shaped even by real early people before the agricultural revolution. Like, did that count? Did the Europeans have a right to colonize empty America?
Yeah.
Because the people who were there already didn't claim ownership of land in the same way. Like, that's the question I always try to answer. Are you allowed to chase them away, back them down? Granted, then you went after them and killed them and removed them from land they were clearly occupying them and whatever. But I'm just saying, like, the original question I can't. I don't think it's
Right.
crystal clear. But
Well,
That's
could
something
be
I
wrong.
think
I
about.
also
Go ahead.
I think the original question is we're trying to apply, it's kind of an anachronism. We're trying to apply libertarian thought, what we think is moral, what isn't, to a time period that was defined by conquest. It wasn't defined by, is this right? It was defined by, I want that, I'm taking it. And so regardless of, what the Indians happened or Native Americans happened to think or what happened, we can only speculate into the future, because whether or not you can originate an ownership of land through toil, through homesteading, etc., we already agree that you can own land. Everyone except for the commies.
So
agrees with
what
that.
if it is that they both so the Native American tribe owns the land in the capacity that they own it, in the capacity that they work it as they see fit. And then also the settler who comes along owns the land in the sense that they've mixed their labor with it and they've put a home there and all those kinds of things. And who actually owns it is the one who can assert their dominance. And what we don't want to admit
That's might makes
is that,
right?
yeah,
Might makes
and
right.
what we don't want to admit is that law actually affects quite a bit more than we hope that all of our laws and morality and philosophy will reason us past. And we use that law and philosophy to enact might makes right. With less bloodshed.
I will say plenty of people objected to this kind of thing. And if you read, I found this very interesting, the parallels. When you read contemporary writings justifying slavery, like at the time there were slaves, contemporary writings justifying colonization and suppression of indigenous people, stealing their rights and everything. And when you read stuff today about abortion, it all has the same language. They're not human beings. They don't have souls. They stand in the way of progress. So they had to make arguments to do what they did because people thought it was wrong.
They have to use philosophy. They have to use law to convince themselves of their might makes right argument. But if it's really deconstructed, it's still might makes right. That's still what's being applied. And even if you look at today, we think we're very modern and cosmopolitan and we've grown past this, but we haven't. The government can, through, quote, eminent domain, which is a law, take your land. But what it really is that they have an entire army and militarized police force that can murder you if you try to resist them. And they have more guns than you do. That's the long and the short of it at the end of the day. They've written a law that tells them that they are able to do it, but really they're able to do it because they have tanks. And so, maybe absolutely also true that the average citizen should be able to have tanks.
And that, of course,
but
that's what war, that is the point, right? We're just getting back to the point of just war. What is it? It's people saying that they have a right to something and then just taking it.
Yep. We're competing for resources, just like the animals.
But the morality is a very human thing. And what we're trying to do is to assert morality over reality in a lot of ways. And I don't mean reality insofar as that's how it should be, that's what the ideal is, but insofar as what's going on the ground. And so whether or not the Indians owned anything, ran buffaloes and kept them safe, and then we murdered them all and the buffaloes, at the end of the day, the person who won is the one who gave away the smallpox blanket. And that's the reality we have to deal with. I know they're not real. It's just a joke.
I think there was a lot of murder, death, kill, for sure.
Yeah. And that's
everybody was killing everybody in those days, though. That's kind of the deal.
Yeah, the concept of the noble savage itself is fiction. There may have been certain pockets or certain tribes that were nonviolent, but the history of the world
Russian peasants had the same. Every underprivileged, every oppressed minority is beatified to justify what another power seeker wants to use them to justify. And we see it today. Yeah. The Russian Revolution was replete with that. The peasant was supposed to be this font of like wisdom and this, it's all like that. Totally. But well, I guess if before we go, I would love to hear, Cam, what is the interplay between society, morality, and the law, in your opinion? And we can use property rights or colonization as a kind of launching point, but
it's an
when it
interesting
comes,
question.
like the central part of how I think is it isn't in property rights. I understand property rights and I can speak in that language, but my understanding of the world and my morality, it does stem from Christian epistemology. Like, I speak out of the concept of God. That's just me. And so when we talk about self-ownership, I use that phrase when I'm talking to people, but I don't even believe it. I'm bought with a price, man. I'm owned. I'm a steward of my life. I'm a steward of the land. What I would say, in the grand scheme of things, we are stewards, and this land is not ours. Period. But I assert morality onto the world, and I know that. I know that when I'm having these conversations about where property stems from, or all of that, I'm asserting my morality onto the world. And I know what I believe, but at the end of the day, I can't tell you a definitive way that we come to the concept of privately owned property, because it doesn't really matter to me. I want to be better than what everyone else has done in the past. That is my goal. And so there are people, like, I do think that there's an ideal. I do think that there was a specifically created order in which we were supposed to live, which was in creation, beautification, fulfillment, and we lost that along the way. And it became about power, became about violence, greed, sex, etc. And honestly, that is why we do at some point need to talk about the lizard people, because I believe that you're going to think I'm crazy, but when people talk about
after
lizard
midnight.
people,
it's a metaphor.
when people talk about lizard people, it isn't. Because a lot of people take it to the point that there are literally reptilian human beings, or beings that are reptilian, and that, the Rothschilds are lizard people, or
there's
the
something
royal family
extra in their
England,
DNA, and
the royal family in England are werewolves. But the point is, if you look at the opening chapters of Genesis, when it talks about the serpent, the word comes from, it's seraph, which comes from the word seraphim, which is a type of interdimensional being. Angel is an easy way to say it, but if you break it down, let's do a little bit of interdimensional being talk. So I think that I think that aliens are interdimensional beings, in that I believe they're heavenly beings.
yeah, I always think that. I'm like, people say they don't believe in interdimensional beings. Wasn't Jesus an interdimensional being?
Well, he was
At least
the
half,
perfect
right?
Venn diagram.
The angels
of
are,
when heaven and earth met.
Yeah.
And so he's within that fifth dimension and in the third at the same time.
Okay. Yes, angels are definitely interdimensional beings.
Yeah, and if you look at like I said, in the garden there was the serpent. The serpent is a heavenly being that resembled a serpent. And then if you fast forward to the Tower of Babel, you have all of the people, which, if you look, okay, so all of the Bible talks about a power struggle. It talks about how God gave humanity the garden to tend. It talks about how he gave them the option to choose whether or not they were going to go with morality or make up your own morality. And the humans chose that they wanted to be king. And so as time progresses, you see the Tower of Babel. They lost Eden. And if you look at the Tower of Babel, it is it's analogous to the Garden of Eden, because they were building up this pyramid, because the Garden of Eden was said to be in a mountainous area, and it had all of the same ideas, concepts, and fillings of the Garden of Eden. And so they were saying that they were king. They were trying to be God. They were trying to be the power. And then God said, well, no, go screw yourself. No, we're talking to each other. Go. And there's this little verse that talks about how after the Tower of Babel, that God gave to the number of nations, split up the nations as to the number of the sons of God. And these are beings who were in the hierarchy of heaven. And each of these nations had this son of God, which is an interdimensional being. And this is not the rebelled. Well, the like Enoch. Well, and well, that would be, you're thinking Nephilim. You're thinking of the Nephilim, which that is a part of it. But if you look at that split, you then see that each of the nations then, and I would say each of the nations now, have this dark being, this rebelled son of God that is not real. And if you look at the different mythologies, you start seeing how they presented themselves to different points in time, different periods of history. And so now it's aliens, because we're more scientific than we are mythological and godlike.
Ryan's yelling at you. Do you see Ryan yelling at you?
But people are like, okay, so how did all of these pyramids go across this very specific line throughout the world?
Yes.
They were recreating Eden in each of these places through the help.
All right. Well, this does sound like another episode, and you guys absolutely have to do it and tell me when it's going to be on. I will not participate, but I will live stream and ask questions about it, because this actually is the kind of stuff, like I said in the beginning, like I like to listen to the Higher Side chats. And although I don't grasp or embrace a lot of the details, not because it's not valid or anything, just because I'm just not there yet. And, but at the same time, and I think Jessica, you were kind of hinting at this or said it outright, that what it does is it reminds you, it puts you in that mindset of, there are questions, there's other stuff going on. And that's when I start introducing nuance into my ideology, because if, I'm terrible at nuance. Like I really was not good at law school. I was really only good at business school and math and stuff. So for me, like, even in my interactions, it's very clear to me, like I have a schedule to do my stuff, blah, 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 blah. I don't even care. I don't get emotional. I don't care. But there is nuance. There are a lot of unanswered questions about the bigger picture. And I try to not fall. I feel like libertarians are going to get cornered, and that if we continue to frame our answers in the context of that system, of the Bill of Rights or the Constitution or whatever, and I mean, that's what you're getting at, then you find that you're at the mercy of democracy. You're at the mercy. And
I'm not willing to submit.
Yeah. And I'm now like trying to level up in my thinking. Yeah. And I did want to ask you, Jessica, what do you think, how do you see, so we can talk about the principles, and it's good because that's the first, that's not the first, but that's the first tier at least of like the path to understanding right and wrong in the context of all those things together. So do you have how do you see those things interplaying? My question to Cam was morality, society, and law, but like he took 5 levels up. So I don't know if we want to bring it back down to earth, but seriously, like there are moral questions, right? It's not might versus right, but there's moral, that like.
Correct. Yeah. And I don't think that we should live in a might makes right type of system, because that means that if I can come over and push you over and take your stuff, that means that's fine. And I didn't steal your stuff. I mightily took it. That's not clearly like what we would agree is a good system to live by. It would create a lot of aggression.
That's what
right.
Lincoln did.
So, right,
I have an
right.
answer.
So
I'm going to let you
anytime-
finish, but I have an answer to that.
the way that people do that. So, I think that there are already natural evolutionary things that exist within our community structures that we can rely on and that have worked for thousands, if not millions of years, however long you think humans have been
Exactly.
around. We can, going back to principles, I think is an interesting way to put it, because I think that there are already structures. Conflict is expensive. It's expensive to conflict within one another, so it makes more sense to cooperate. And so in that sense, we'll cooperate not because we have a higher sense of morality, but simply because it is far more expensive to conflict with one another.
Yeah.
And that's not
yes.
right.
I
That's
have
not
to
always
say-
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish what you're saying, but I just.
Oh, I was going to say that's not always going to pan out, of course. But if you look at the current system, not that any of you are advocating for the current system, but there are many who are. If you look at the current system, of course, we have far more conflict than I think would otherwise originate organically. And I think we definitely agree that much of it is generated, and it's generated to fill the pockets of a lot of people. And so people fear, oh, the warlords will happen, and oh, this conflict will happen, and we'll be beating each other in the head in the streets. And I don't think that that's true. I think that's a very dim outlook on humanity. That system doesn't work, and we don't set our communities up that way.
But that's what's happening.
I agree.
Because
of the state.
Right. The arguments against anarchism are invariably the status quo.
They are the
shoot each
state
other in
itself.
the street.
Yes,
Yeah.
and much worse. That's when you read Hoppe, you're like, it's so much worse than it would otherwise be. But I always try to point out to people that principles are pragmatism. Whether God made man and earth at the same time, or we emerged out of 4 million years of evolution or 10,000 years of civilization, the principles emerge because they are the things that work. I even couch morality in instructing my kids. I was like raised very religious, dogmatic, whatever.
Okay.
And I went through like questioning and a lot of processes. And in so many ways, I came back to where my father was about like principles and morality and law, libertarianism, everything. But through this other way, like it's right and good. And I say to my kids, like, I'm not telling you not to sleep around because God will be mad. I'm telling you not to sleep around because it's bad for you. It's a very serious thing to do. Like kids, it's hard to keep you kids healthy. And you have 2 parents who love each other, who are committed to each other, who have a stable home. Can you imagine how fucked up you would be if you were unwanted child of like a teenager? You know, it would be a lot of those people are heroes. Yeah. I mean, to rise out of that it gives me goosebumps. It's a very difficult thing to do. The odds are against you. So do you really want to take so lightly rolling the dice with somebody or giving them one step behind? Mostly it's about the love. It's not about the material things, but it's about, having an environment where a child can be nurtured. And it's very clear, that the rules of morality all kind of point to that. And there's like, oh, birth control. I'm like, it's bad for you. Like you start popping those pills, like who the F knows what's going to happen to your cute little ovaries. Just, I don't know, and I'm not telling people not to do it. What I'm saying is I feel like morality, if the principles are the pragmatism, the morality is healthy and natural in a lot of ways. And if you take it too far and you get crazy and you use it for power, that's the problem. I even like religion. I like structure, but it can, I don't have a lot of faith in the Vatican. And I think this Pope is, I don't want to talk about it, but I think there must be some like cosmic wrong to like call the Pope names, but that guy is
Protestant,
bad
so
news.
I don't have anything. I'm Protestant. I don't have anything good to say about a Pope.
Yeah, no, I don't. You gotta. You got what you got. I got my own baggage. Thank you.
But no, what I think is interesting is the way you describe the principle and pragmatism is this is unhealthy, this will hurt you. That what you're describing is sin as described in the Bible.
Yes.
People like to think of sin as God will be mad at you. But if you look at all of the laws, if you look at all the things God said were sinful or abominations, these are things that hurt you, hurt others, or hurt God.
He's trying to tell you.
And God doesn't have to be, you don't have to define God in that traditional way. And I'm not defining God in the traditional way. I'm just saying the concept of God, like to be like, well, who cares if you hurt God? You have to believe in God to care if you hurt God. The concept that God, I think, embodies is, we can't, even the concept that we have that I personally am afraid of like disparaging in any way, but even that concept, it's not actually true. It's just as far as we can conceive of it. So it is, even our own concept of it is smaller than it really is. So whatever it is that you don't want to offend is something that is the question. It goes to the questions that we were asking at the beginning. Like, what is that bigger thing? I can't even define it. I'm happy to call it God, and I like to have a relationship with God. But even if you don't believe in a personal God, you'd still do well to respect that there's we're part of a larger thing we cannot understand.
You still believe in right in some fashion, because I've noticed that every atheist I've ever spoken to, and I've once considered myself an atheist for nearly a decade, and I still believed that there was some kind of like objective morality, some difference between right and wrong. Like we understood there was right and wrong. Like slavery was wrong. There are natural things that are correct and natural things that are, and so can you scientifically define what creates that? I don't know that you can. At least it's above my pay grade.
I even
to describe it.
The concept of like plumb and building, plumb and level, it's called true. There is truth.
Right.
And we don't know it all. It keeps going. But a yogi I love, or maybe the yogi, said the question of God is unanswerable and irrelevant, because it doesn't matter if you know about God or who God is or whatever. The answer of what it would take to be content or achieve the afterlife is the same as what it would take to be content and achieve here, which is free yourself from desire, feed that spiritual true self, be self, eventually rid yourself of self, which is, I'm telling you, the yogi, Mother Teresa, and like my mom all have the same philosophy. It's kind of crazy. I'm like, Mom, you're a yoga. She's like, I don't know. I just sit here. And I'm like a potted plant. I'm like, you're totally a yogi.
That's it though. He sits under a tree and just
I know, and she's super Catholic, but she's the yogi.
Yeah. I think it's all, no matter, it's all digging at some fundamental like human actuality that we understand without ever being in the same culture, having the same education. There's something that you understand innately as a child, I think, that there's a truth in the universe. And so, that's hard to understand. People who make science into a god need things to follow that logos or logical actualization. And that's actually faulty, because science is only a tool. And it can't actualize the universe for you.
This is the craziest thing. They don't actually accept the science as a religion. All they do is accept the scientists as priests, and they have them. Yeah. The stuff is written in Greek, literally written in Greek. And you try to tell people, I read the study about masks. They don't work. They could make it worse. How could you presume to read the study about masks? Are you a doctor? It's like, well, but I can read the language. Greek? It's like, but it's in English. A lot of those words are not English. It's like, they're just, you know what I mean? You cannot actually interpret this scientific material yourself. That's considered a sin.
Well, you can. To be fair, anybody who's gone through a statistics level class, college level statistics class, right? So,
but it's an apostasy.
They pretend, and you put that on yourself. you say, I can't read this because I'm not one of the hallowed men with the white coat or the funny hat.
Taboo, like it's embarrassing, right? Like you'll be mocked.
Much in the way that the Bible was in Latin, so that the common people could read it, and it was apostasy to write it in English for the first time. So, yeah, absolutely, there are people who his entire self-worth is wrapped up in the idea that you can't read a scientific study. So I would advise anyone to not buy into that.
Read
You can read it. You definitely can read and understand it. It takes a little bit of effort, a little bit of statistics, but you can read it for sure. I was just talking to the people. I don't know who's even listening.
I know, I'm looking. I mean,
maybe Ryan. Ryan, you can read scientific studies, buddy.
Well, I do want to address Ryan calling me a son of a bitch because he read through a whole book in order to speak on the topic with me.
Yeah, what
Yet
book?
I went ahead and did it in another episode. It's called The Unseen Realm by Michael Heiser. I've read the follow-up, Angels, and he has another one called Demons that I'm going to get to.
I'm reading Forbidden Archaeology, which may in some ways support this.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, yeah. I'll get you. You need to read that book. But what I'm going to say to Ryan is, we talked about it for like 5 minutes at the 2-hour mark. I think we can do an episode. I think you're safe.
Yeah.
Buddy.
Yeah, we didn't go into it at all.
Yes, no,
Yeah,
no. That was a tease, actually. Look, now we have all these people want to come watch that.
Yeah,
I hope so, because that it really that
I'm excited for that episode.
How everything has worked for me is I went because I just believed what my parents said, like everyone does, until I got to college, and then I went to college, and luckily I didn't fall into the stupid classes full of stupid people and stupid professors who say stupid things. I just had one good professor. I am so pissed off that I have a college degree, but I
have to tell Ryan, I do not want to be on the episode. I just want to watch.
Yeah.
But no, but that's the thing. I had one professor in an ethics class simply say the statement, morality that begins with me must logically and necessarily end with me. And that's,
I don't get it.
So if your morality is built on something other than something beyond you, something eternal, then if it's only your morality, if it's your truth dies with you.
Yes, that's why I hate humanism. Humanism is this idea that you have to be good to people because they're human. And I'm like, but humans suck. Mm-hmm. I suck. Yeah. Like, I don't deserve, to always be treated with love and respect. If it's based purely on my ability to always treat people with love and respect, I mostly suck. So you can't use that. It has to be something beyond yourself. It has to be for the pure good. Totally.
Yeah. That is a very Western modern idea, like this sort of like intrinsic value of human life, that there are everybody, no matter what, is absolutely valuable to the same level. And
deserves health insurance.
I'm not sure I agree that everybody is contributing to the world at exactly the same level. Or not even contributing, but just like intrinsic value in some way that I personally have to make room in myself to value every life equally. Well, that's completely impossible. I don't value any of you at the same level that I value my mother. So already
you can't love something you don't know. That's why my dad said you always have to read the Bible and stuff. He's like, because you can't love someone you don't know.
Right. Well, that's good advice. Yeah.
Yeah. He was like, if you have to love God and you're not going to love him if you don't know him. So you got to read this stuff.
Yeah. And so
I think Samson has to go out. What do you think?
Yeah.
He's taking the panic for only so long. Eventually he's like, I really have to go.
All right, so let's wrap it up. But all I was going to say was the last 10 to 12 years have been me finding things that my mom or dad were wrong about. And then, it started with one thing that my dad was wrong about. And that was all sins are equal.
And I didn't even know that was a thing. I wasn't taught that.
Yeah, well, it's more Protestant. But that's what people talk about it. And it's a yes and no answer. But when I started delving into that, I mean, Jesus, even when he was brought before Pilate, said that he who brought me to you is guilty of the greater sin. So if there's a greater sin and Jesus said it, then there must be lesser sins. And so it led to this, how do I think? What do I think? And so it's been a long journey of me going, okay, so I've been taught about hell my whole life. What is true? And then this last year, like I said, I've been reading. I read The Unseen Realm. I've read a book called Angels. There's a shorter version of the book by Michael Heiser called Supernatural, if you don't want to get too far into the weeds, because the Unseen Realm is more academic. But I credit Tim Mackey from the Bible Project for this portion of my learning, because I went from, oh, well, I can know by reading this, to going, oh, well, I mean, there are other people as well, but context is important. Understanding the people that it was written to, understanding the time period, understanding the other religions, understanding the archaeology. Yes. This is important to understand it. And so that's where my conversation about interdimensional beings comes from, and will come from. Really? Everyone was always like, oh, do you believe aliens? And I'm like, maybe, we'll see. But I don't care, because I think that most of what we've seen and most of what's been described is far too similar, and I see a motive behind it, behind a lot of the way things work. And so I've always said I think it's not from aliens from far reaches of outer space. I think it's something that's here and is always here, and we catch glimpses of. And so that's where I was with that. But
wow,
I went through this whole episode without mentioning that this is episode 69.
Nice. Well, this is the wrong time. Good, because at least we did it at the end, or when we were in some more deeper talk, because we could have really black silky cocked it.
Yeah. I am entirely to blame for that, by the way.
Yeah, can you please explain that? Because I can't have that going down out of context.
So she was showing us pictures on her phone of chickens.
Black silky cocks.
I
didn't know what they were.
There's a breed of chicken. There's a breed of chicken called Silkies, and she had a black one. And so I just happened to mention that Monica was showing us pictures of silky black cock.
I did not. That was funny that you knew that. I was trying to remember who knew. Who knew?
Yeah.
Look at how beautiful. I have to learn how to put stuff up.
The Silkies are a highly prized.
Here, how do I get that to
breed of chicken?
Isn't that pretty? Yeah. Oh, really?
Very
Did you see his girlfriend? Did I show you his girlfriend?
No.
Her name is Yeti.
Of course, he's got a girlfriend. Can't be a beautiful black cock and not have a girl.
Actually, his girlfriend is my screensaver.
Wait, I thought that was David.
Lovely.
No, I changed David because I was afraid my husband would be jealous.
Oh.
I had a picture of David because Cam said, "What's your favorite picture of yourself?" And I was like, that wasn't really a question. Like, I need a picture for a thing. So I sent you a bunch of pictures, and you took the worst one. And in order to justify it, you got David to give you an even worse one. But his was so bad it was good, and I made it my wallpaper. So I'll bring that back up.
Is Monica genuinely believes that I chose the worst one. And literally, I just looked at the different pictures, like, oh, she looks pretty in this, and put it up.
So speaking of,
I didn't realize how bad it was until you picked it, and then I was just like, "Oh my,
Speaking of Monica looking pretty, my second or third day on Twitter, you were going to an event and you wore a gown and you posted it on Twitter, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, Monica, you look so beautiful," and you said thank you, and that was like my first interaction with you.
Our first interaction. Thank you. It was probably that day. It was the
I got so
Grammys.
Excited. Okay,
yeah.
I got really excited. I texted my husband. And I was like, Monica Perez just talked to me.
I would have talked to you. I talk. I'm sure you had many interesting things. I'm sure I talked to you again. Trying to find David's picture. It's so funny.
But you did. You looked fabulous. You had a fabulous
Thank you.
Yes.
I really worked hard to look good for the Grammys. And I've been a few times. And it really, believe it or not, it loses its its appeal to like do the glamorous stuff.
Sure.
Mostly because eventually I got to the point where I didn't look as good as I thought. You always think, well, if I wore a dress like that, I would look so gorgeous. And then you get the dress and you put it on, you're like, I don't look anywhere near as good as I thought I was going to look. And then you kind of feel like the fantasy is a little better than the reality. How do I not have... Oh, we're
always our harshest critics, and we don't know how we look to others. And you were a knockout, Miss Ma'am.
Thank you. I'm sure I really
as a man,
busted
I cannot understand this because I'm always exactly as good looking as I think I am.
You're great looking. I mean, you're as good as you look. Better than that black silky cock, I can tell you right
the
there.
Total package.
And when you're packing heat, I mean,
that is attractive.
There it is.
Yay!
That was my screensaver. Do you think my husband would think that was okay?
I don't know, but that man is sexy. What's funny about this photo
that
is
made
I said,
his
hey,
day,
I need a picture
sure.
of you. And he sent me 2, and I was like, I want one of these, but I want you holding the gun. And he was like, okay. And this came of it.
Oh, he literally took that picture for you?
He took it for me.
Well, technically, you got another person involved. I mean, even
the composition of the picture is fantastic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's artistically, it's like the redneck Annie Leibovitz, captured that. That could be like the cover of a calendar. I
mean,
got it all. It could be in a
redneck
Kemp
Annie
ad.
Leibovitz. I've never wanted to be called something more in my life.
I mean, let's just be real. I had some increased blood flow when I saw this photo.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Oh, that's a compliment. That's a great compliment.
Pretty exciting.
Oh,
so you should
right.
Photoshop another picture, not mine, kind of going in the other direction for the 69th episode.
Nice. You should just invert him and put 2 on top of each other.
Yeah, you don't even make it too obvious. Just like have him there. Yeah, you're right. You could like flip it, and then when gives a whole new meaning to like go F yourself. Just flip it, mirror it.
I could put 2 together and make his barrels touch.
Poor Dave. He's probably asleep right now, or we're plotting against him.
I would go subtler. I think he would like it. I think he would think it was.
Oh no, he would love it. Oh, he would love it. But
it
is 2 hours and 30 minutes in, and your dog needs to go out. So
I need to go out too.
He gave up. The other one literally pees on the carpet, so we'd have all night if it was her.
I tried with you, lady. I'm just gonna go on the rug.
Yeah, totally. And she doesn't even make any noise. She's just like she's obviously too busy.
Anarchy.
Anyway. Yeah, we rescued her. Yeah, exactly. Anarchy definitely reigns. Samson and Delilah. You like that, Samson and Delilah? You probably think it's a Bible reference. It's a dead reference.
Oh, it's cute
My
though.
husband's a deadhead. Yeah, I know. Anyway. The dog groomers all know it's a deadhead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Monica, you're welcome to come back anytime. You know that. And
thank you. I'm not coming back for that one. I appreciate it, but I want to tell me about that one. I want to see it. I want to watch it.
Okay, and we'll dig deep on that one. But thank you for coming in on this really strange day.
Yeah,
and giving.
I was so excited to talk
to other people.
Today.
Oh yes, it has been so fun, and I am very pleased that we managed to put it in the proper perspective by not letting it dominate 2.5 hours of conversation. Think of all the great and meaningful things we talked about that were not derailed by that unworthy mayhem.
All I'm saying is I got to load both of my guns on screen while y'all talked. So, I mean, I was happy.
That was pretty exciting for all of us, I think.
I think so. Yeah. Everyone.
I'm wondering if I can get like taken down by association. I've been taken down so many times, even by YouTube, that I totally like you were saying, like those people don't care if anybody thinks they're racist. Like I totally don't care, whatever. Take it down. I hope that the SWAT team doesn't come to my house, but you're the guy with the gun. So this time it's not on me.
Cam's house. Yeah, this is why I tell people, don't tell people what you have. Like that's not something. I mean, like fair enough. Cam did a bit.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Don't tell people what you have.
No, I got you for a lot of
reasons. You think this is what I don't.
No,
even have
I
these
don't.
Anymore. They fell into a vat of acid almost immediately.
They did. There was a boating
hard.
accident during
It was
this
fake,
episode
clearly
at the bottom
fake.
of a lake.
I
See, it's
Heisenberg.
a little orange cap. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey,
Yes.
thank you for coming. I enjoy you. And also, it was so funny. I was talking to someone the other day, and they were like, "How did you get Monica Perez to come on your show, your little rinky-dink for-listener show?" And I was like, "Well, here's the deal. I made an episode of something that she happened to like, and I shot it her way, and we became friends."
I happen to like it. That was a masterpiece. It was like 3 masterpieces in a row.
What was it? What do you get?
I was
What are
yours
you guys
after
talking about?
that. The
My
two
Red
or
pills
3, yeah.
of the week.
Wait, the what?
Waco and my red pills of the week, Waco
Yeah.
and Ruby Ridge.
I mean,
red pills are good.
red pilled
Yeah.
my son. My son lives with me. And you red pilled him. So you're not only my friend, you're a friend of the family.
Oh,
Yeah. Who knows? You know, these kids, they don't know about that.
yeah.
That's
And
what's
I
so
think
funny
Joe
about-
Tundra over here in the chat, he said he to see these things laid bare. Oh, that's great. He laid bare these issues, these events laid bare for him the true nature of the state. Joe said, I think something like that. Just today, he said something like that.
Yeah. Well,
Excellent.
and that's what's funny
Nice.
about them is like my friend Josh listened to it with his son, and they would do it when they were driving back and forth to like 5-minute rides to go to a practice or something. And he was like, my son made me sit in the car in the garage to finish each and every one of them.
Yeah.
And then
That's
I started
cool.
doing the live streams, and he was watching one of them, and his son said, "Why are you watching with Fat Thor in it?" And and then he told his son who I was, and with the red pill stuff, and he was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I'm like, "No, dude, Fat Thor.
Yeah.
I'll take it."
That's
This
So-
is Fat Thor's favorite beer, by the way.
what is it? Let me see.
Tropicalia. It's made in Athens,
Nice.
Georgia. It's a Creature Comforts brewery. And this is
Wow.
in the Avengers movie where there's Fat Thor. He's seen drinking these beers. And
Really?
yeah, because they filmed part of it over here, and he actually
Yes.
likes this beer, so he's like, "Well, we'll feature it in the
Wow.
movie." And then for like 6 months, I couldn't find any of my beer because all these pedestrian tourists
Funny.
were buying it up.
But that's
And
a
so finally-
coincidence then that you drink that
Yeah.
beer and he just decided
It
to
just
be
happens to be my
he is
beer,
Fat Thor and you. Yeah.
and I was
Fun
furious at Fat Thor for drinking my beer.
Yeah, ruins everything.
Fun fact though, before I started working with Ryan, I worked at a leather store, and I sold leather. I taught people how to make stuff out of leather, etc. Since the end, I think some of Infinity War, but definitely Endgame and anything after that, and some Disney movies and stuff like that. If you see leather, like the Falcon and the Winter Soldier that's coming out, if you see leather in those movies, in those costumes, I touched it because I sold it.
Wow. Wow, that's so
So-
cool.
It's hot.
So next time you watch a Marvel movie,
Cool and hot.
next time you watch a Marvel movie, just know I touched that leather. I picked out that leather for those people.
Wow.
Looks
And
really good.
with that, thank you again for showing up. If any of you want to hear my ramblings and ironic comments on Twitter, I won't say sarcastic because I don't really do sarcasm as much as I do irony, and I feel like there's an important distinction to be made there. But if you want to read me just talk shit online, twitter.com/thisismlga. If you want to see Miss Jessica Green do the same thing, just go on Twitter, search Libertarian Kitchen Witch or LIBTKITWITCH, and she'll do the same thing. And we play off each other. So
I
it's
talk
fun.
a lot of shit.
And you need to listen to the propaganda report because
Thank you.
let's be
I
honest,
spend a lot of time on Twitter, but I do not talk a lot of shit. It's at Monica Perez Show, and you can find all the propaganda report stuff on there.
Monica's
and
legit.
you need to- yeah, you need
I'm
to talk
sorry, I
more-
just don't have time for fun.
You need to talk more shit, though. I'm not even kidding. It's so much fun.
It's a lot
But yeah,
of fun.
propaganda report. She's on Rofkin, which I just learned what that was. So search for her on there. She's on Patreon. Search for propaganda report on there. She's everywhere. Just find
It's
her,
the propaganda
glom
report
onto
though
her,
with my co-host.
Jar Jar Binkley, and
Jar Jar Binkley.
yeah, just glom onto her because she's a wonderful human being. Jessica does some wonderful watercolor paintings, and she gets better every time I see a painting. And
Sample.
you can find those on Instagram at Sovereign Cookies Art.
Yes, I do
Find
post my art. I am an amateur. He's exaggerating a little bit. I've been painting since October. I very much enjoy it. Please, yeah, if you'd like to follow my art journey, Sovereign Cookies Art.
I will
Which
not
is-
be pleased until I have a painting in my background.
It's very much disconnected from my political things on Twitter. So if you
Could you
follow
just
me on
paint some gun?
Instagram,
Oh yeah, don't. I
paint your
know.
gun. Yeah, if you follow me on Instagram, I don't follow you back, it's only because I keep that like an art space. So I
have a
follow
cocktail
mostly
blog.
artists. Oh, that's awesome! I will totally
Oh,
follow
Monica
your.
mixes.
Yeah,
things
Monica makes
outside
sense.
of
And I used to
politics,
try to
yeah.
keep it separate, but
There, yeah,
Just
it's
a
hard to compartmentalize it, but it's maybe important for my mental health to have a space outside of politics. So if you follow me on Instagram and you're a politics poster, I might not follow you back. Please don't take offense. I'm just keeping it as an art space. Awesome. Thank you.
understood.
Yeah.
There it is.
Thank you guys. Until next time. Next time I will be a spectator. Then the time after that, I'll be back on.
It was wonderful to talk to you again, Monica.
Look, you too. It's always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Before we go, I want you to, if you haven't noticed yet, I have that dumb Trump flag that I think is hilarious.
Oh yeah,
And
is he
also-
Rambo?
Yeah, also, here it is, breaking in to the Capitol.
No way.
Thank you, Paul.
Oh my gosh. It's a prop for them. I think it's a prop for you too.
It is.
Yeah.
'cause I
Wow,
think
that
it's
is
hilarious.
interesting. That's good.
So-
That's good stuff right there.
So,
All right, guys.
I think I've named everything that you guys are on. I'm just an MLGA everywhere.
That's plenty.
Go
That's fun.
go to makelibertygreatagain.locals.com if you want to join my weird little group of people that talk about everything. Also, I don't compartmentalize anything. Wherever I am, I'm just me. And me is a shit poster. So, with that, thank you guys for joining me. And to the audience, all four of you, do your best to stay sane.